public to participate in the meeting as an attendee. Attendees must register to participate. The registration link is unique to the meeting and can be found in the description of the Nantucket Government TV YouTube live feed for the meeting. People registering to be an attendee must use their names, otherwise they will not be allowed to participate in discussion. Attendees will join in listening mode and they can click the raise the hand button if they wish to speak. The chair will call on those who have raised their hands in the order in which they were raised at the appropriate time in the meeting. I will confirm the member access for all select board members and people anticipated on the agenda who are present. Make sure that you can all hear me. Melissa Murphy.
Here.
Jason Bridges.
Here.
Christy Ferrantella.
Here.
Matt Fee.
Here.
Thank you. And then I will go through town staff members that are present. Libby Gibson.
Here.
Amy Baxter.
Here.
Erica Mooney.
Present.
David Gray.
Here, good evening.
Rob McNeil.
Present.
Kathy Flynn.
Present.
Roberto Santamaria.
Present. Present.
Thank you, Roberto. Sorry, I'm just looking for who else is here. Holly Backus. Tucker Holland.
Here.
And we have with us Val Oliver from the HDC.
Here.
Thank you. Gary Shaw from the hospital.
Here.
Diane Coombs from the HDC.
I am here.
Mary Longacre from Coastal Resiliency Advisory Committee.
Good afternoon.
Michael Wilson is here.
I am here. Thank you, Madam Chair.
George Pucci from Town Council.
Good afternoon, present. Yeah.
Abby is also present from the HDC this evening. I think I covered everyone. This open meeting of the Select Board is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. Can everyone believe that that is over now? In order to mitigate the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, we have been advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend public gatherings. And as such, the governor's order suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The order, which you can find posted with the agenda materials for this meeting, allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely so long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation. We are ensuring public participation through the Zoom webinar functions outlined previously. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and that all attendees participating via video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that folks can see you and be careful not to share your screen unless you mean to do so. Anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. All meeting materials have been provided on the town's website unless otherwise noted. We usually have the public health report separately. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless the chair notes otherwise. I will introduce each speaker on the agenda. After they conclude their remarks, people can raise their hands for questions or comments, either the public or anyone on the meeting. Please remember to mute your phone or computer when you're not speaking. Please remember to speak clearly in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. Please go through the chair if you wish to engage in conversation amongst members, and every vote will be taken by a roll call. So with that, I will open the meeting. I don't believe that there are any changes to note on the agenda. Is that correct? Okay. And I will turn it over to the town manager for the announcements.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This meeting is being video and audio recorded. And Rob, I don't know if you wanted me to give this announcement, the next one, DPW textile reuse collection drop off. You want to do it or?
I'm happy to.
Okay.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, DPW is happy to announce the second textile reuse and recycling collection to drop off only. It's up at the area of Take It or Leave It at the landfill. As we've discussed, the third Sunday of every month. This Sunday from 8 till noon, we'll be back. And I'm happy to report that at our first event, we filled almost half of an existing 53-foot box trailer. So there's certainly a lot of pent up clean out that's been going on through COVID. And we are happy to oblige and take what people are bringing us right now. So I just, based on the feedback we've gotten, I think that there's going to be a really good turnout again on Sunday, and we're encouraged what we've seen so far. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Rob, and thanks for having the event. It's really, really helpful for now. It's kind of an interim measure till things get back up. Coastal Resiliency Advisory Committee has an announcement about a brochure that has been developed. And I am looking for, Mary Longacre, I think, are you going to?
Yes, I'd be happy to, Libby.
Thank you.
So the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee has created this brochure. Erica has it up on the screen, but it's also designed as a trifold brochure. And the idea is to give people something that is easy to access, that has some tips that they can implement right away, that has resources for further information, and that introduces the concept of resiliency as something where you prepare and adapt, not just wait for something to recover from. So there are some tips here. Some of them don't require construction, such as keeping hazardous or valuable or sentimental materials off the floor level. Some are a little bit more involved. Some are, if you're considering a renovation or if you're building new, these are good things to keep in mind, like using water-resistant materials. And then we have a number of resources. The town, for instance, the Resilient Nantucket information that will be coming out soon, FEMA resources. The state has a coastal homeowners preparedness handbook. Very, very great information in that. But again, we wanted something that was, potentially a piece of paper that you could pick up at the building department, or something that could be sent out electronically, easy to digest, just, one page, both sides, and something that speaks to people in their daily lives, as opposed to being a highly technical or extremely large document that would be difficult to absorb. So I want to thank Dr. Sarah Boyce and Graham Durovich, who with me were the members who designed the content for the brochure. And I want to give a big thank you to Florencia Rulo, who designed the actual layout and created the images for the brochure. She did a great job, we think. So we hope this will be made available to people. We have some plans for electronic distribution, and we have ideas for physical distribution once that becomes something more reasonable to do after COVID. I'd be happy to answer any questions about the brochure.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mary. Sorry. That's it from town manager announcements.
Oh, I do have a hand up. I don't know if that was a question for Mary. Scott Shell.
I
Don't
think it's a public comment.
I think it's public comment.
Oh, okay. Scott, I'll come to you under public comment. That'll be a few things further down our agenda. At this time, there is a quorum of the HDC present, and I'd like to recognize them to call their meeting to order, even though there are items later on the agenda.
I'm here to pull the meeting together. So this is a meeting of the HDC on March 16th at 5 p.m. In conjunction with the Town of Nantucket Chamber. And we have got Abby Camp. I thought Abby was here. And Val Oliver.
Here. Yes, sorry, Madam Chair, I'm here.
Okay, and that's Abby Camp. And
Okay.
I am here as the third person.
Thank you, Diane. Appreciate
You're
it.
welcome. You.
Um, Diane, you're not muted. If you could mute, I'll move on to the next item. Thank you so much. COVID-19 weekly update. Are there any opening public comments in relation to COVID-19? Then I will turn it over to Gary Shaw, the CEO of Nantucket Cottage Hospital.
Oh, well, thank you, Don.
Welcome back, Gary. We haven't seen you in a while.
Well, it's been a pleasure not to have to be here because you guys are running things so well and the partnership's been great at the hospital. I've been focusing my time on vaccines, and I know that a lot of you have probably at different points gone through there to see what's happening or maybe even received the service, but it's great coordination with the town and the VFW, so we're very thankful to have that site. I know Roberto is probably going to talk about what the governor had mentioned today in an announcement to bring vaccines forward. So I won't put that out there, Roberto. I won't steal your thunder. But I'd just like to say that we're ready, having done what is essentially a soft start and a hard start. Moving into giving vaccines, incorporating music, and trying to make it a de-stressed environment where folks can actually come out and feel some hope and enjoy the day. Moving forward, as we start to see these waves of eligibility come forward, just please keep in mind that we will move as fast as we can with vaccines based on what's released. And we know that J&J, Moderna, and Pfizer are starting to be manufactured more quickly. So we hope to get quite a bit more dosage out there. I have to say that the work that Michelle Epps and Roberto have done with the state to keep Nantucket in the forefront of what our needs are has been excellent. And I can say that partnership is fantastic. Never been better. In fact, our demands met, things shipped early due to weather, but it's just been a nice dialogue to see that happening. So please know that that's working really well. Next week, of course, we'll have a phase open up. If we look at what we can do related to capability to the VFW, just from a numbers perspective, minimum, including a blend of first and second doses, we can do minimum just, on receipt about 1,400 a week, but we can go up to about 2,500 a week if we get the vaccine. So, we've got a lot of people starting to come into the island. I think it's a lot livelier out there now than I've seen in the past. The traffic circles are getting busier, but we have to just keep some diligence in place while we are on this precipice between the rush to vaccinate, to keep variants from getting here and getting a foothold, and to give people hope, develop that immunity over the next 4 to 5 weeks after they've received the first and second doses. So the hope is to get as much vaccine as arms as possible. Roberto is going to give us updates, so I won't cover much more about COVID, other than that the caseload has surged a little bit, and we've been out both publicly facing that concern, and Roberto will talk about why that's happening. But I did want to say that probably several months back, that one of the Board of Health members and you had gotten some information about sniff testing and what that might apply or not apply related to COVID. Right now, there's no, that we're aware of, authorized sniff test available. It requires a research program with data given to the FDA and then an EAU authorized, which allows that to be used in a pre-approved way. There were 2 sniff tests that came forward, one that was aligned with a research program at Yale. The Cottage Hospital staff and our laboratorian here evaluated those along with the Board of Health, Malcolm. And then another one aligned with Mass General Hospital and Harvard through the Center for Neurology, and we evaluated that one as well. We elected not to do anything really at this point with the Yale study. I feel that there needs to be further definition in that. But we are moving forward in a partnership with a research project on the MGH Harvard side. So the Cottage Hospital and MGH would essentially be linked where at a point in the future, we're right now requesting approval as a site at the Cottage Hospital. We would receive cards that have on them aromas that are underneath the layers of covering. And the process would be you would get only if you come through one of our COVID drive-throughs or either the portico or the Stop the Spread, You would be offered an opportunity by being given a card if you wanted it with an instruction sheet on it that would then allow you to take an iPhone, scan a code, be linked to an app. The app is where you basically fill in your information about yourself. The permissions are given at that level back to the research. And then you follow your instructions and do the sniff test and record what you have found. This particular level of research will not give results back to patients, and it will not give results back to the cottage hospital. So it's considered to be a first stage. We do feel that in the future, this research project will evolve into a second phase where results could be available, but that is not what this is about at this point. It's really to see if there's enough information that would allude that this could move forward into the next phase. I anticipate we'll probably have cards here once approved in the coming weeks as to start handing out, and you would see those at the portico or at the Stop the Spread. But that's about it on that piece. So I'm open for questions.
Any questions for Gary?
Hi, Christy.
Oh, Christy?
Thanks. I just wanted to ask about the Stop the Spread. How long will that be in place? Is it through the summer or will it stop before then?
We've requested it to be extended, and it was through June. So it's just based on phased requests. So we'll continue as long as we feel that there's a need that we'd want to separate traffic. As we get lower COVID cases, it does take quite a bit to have two staffs at two different locations and move into summer care. We'll have a surge of care needs at the cottage hospital. So I would hope we wouldn't need to Stop the Spread separately. We just wanted to take the flow and separate it from the parking lot, all the way out to the windmill and have a different site. So let's cross our fingers and hope that we won't need it, but it's authorized through June.
Thank you.
Oh, anybody else? Okay, turn it over to Roberto.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. And there's no thunder to be stolen, so you could have done the whole thing, and I would have been off the hook for today. So let me share the screen as normal and go over my quick 5 slides. So, well, it should be quick 5 slides. There we go. So over the past year, we've given over 28,000 tests, but luckily only of those, we've only had 1,261 positives. But over the past 7 days, like Gary said, we did have a surge, which we were out. We gave a lot of social media blitz and regular media blitz on that to get information out, and we have seen that starting to drop. So that's great news. But you'll see the little spike. It's right there. We were moving into a nice small slope, and we had a spike, but we're starting to see it. We're starting to see it go down, so that's good. What we are watching, though, is this is last week's test. We did not get today's test back yet today, but it could be back tomorrow. We did see that we are still looking at 5 new cases per day based on our sewage flow. But what we are also seeing is that it's really important to also pay attention that the flow is going up. So pay attention over here to the 25, that according to this 1 million gallons per day, the estimated population on island when this was taken on March 8th was 25,000 people. So we're starting to see our population already starting to move up for our seasonal residents as well. Where are we in the vaccine plan? Starting Monday the 22nd, we will be fully into phase 2-3. With President Biden's commitment of opening it up fully by May 1st, it did accelerate a lot of the projections. So we are moving into 2-3 on Monday, but we are also expecting to go back into 2-4 starting 2 weeks from then in April. So it's moving a lot quicker, and we're going to be in full phase 3 by April 16th, which is great. It's really interesting. There's a lot of mixed responses across the state from other boards of health. But the way we see it here, and I just got off a meeting with Michelle over at NCH, this is great because what it does is that they've given us a roadmap. We now know where we all stand on the scheduling. So that is excellent. And starting on Monday, everyone in this phase will be able to get their make their appointment. Please go to the website on your screen, and for those on the radio, it's covidvaccine.massgeneralbrigham.org. That takes you straight to the appointment site, and if you qualify, which does tell you all the qualifications while you're making the appointment, you can go ahead and make the appointment at that point. We're really excited to see it, and the only part that you don't see in this little screen that the governor has added is that on Monday we're also opening it up to 60 plus. Right now it is the 65 plus. It is now 60 plus starting Monday. So you can log in over the weekend, make your appointment. This is for all the teachers, early education, K-12 workers, transit workers, DPW workers, public health workers, grocery, utility, food, agriculture, all sanitation, all retail as well. So basically any frontline worker, and as well as agricultural. So we're moving very fast. And with that, just a quick update from this week. We've given over close to 3,000 first doses and over 1,400 of the fully vaccinated people on island. So we're looking for that number to double by the end of next month. So we're in really good shape. We're moving very quickly. So that's really important to see that we're moving very fast. And that's it. I will pull up the eligibility from the state just so that we can see it here. This is what becomes available on March 22nd. I'll leave this up for a few seconds for anyone who wants to pause it or anything if you're watching on YouTube. But this is also available on the mass.gov website. And it gives you the whole list of everyone who is available and when they will be available. And then we'll go forward from there. Any questions?
Christy?
Thank you. I noticed that the state of Massachusetts has a sign up on that webpage on mass.gov. Can Nantucket residents use that link, or can they only go through our hospital?
Anyone in the state of Massachusetts can use this link. Those links will get you to the mass vaccination sites, which is Gillette Stadium. Well, Gillette Stadium. It's no longer Fenway, but it's Heinz Convention Center, the one in Danvers, the mall out in Springfield and Auburn, I believe. So the sign up that's on the state on mass.gov gets you to any of those. Sorry for the vacuum cleaner. Those will get you over to the state, but the one to get to the Nantucket and the Martha's Vineyard vaccination sites, you have to go through our link.
Thank you.
For that question. Matt.
Yeah, I've got a question. I've had a couple of people reach out to me, and one was a taxi driver who's driven people to the out to the VFW and then picked them up and brought them back, who signed up and got vaccinations here. And another was an individual concerned that was happening. Is that something that we should be concerned about? Is it allowed? You know, I know some places do 30-mile limits and different things. What is our thinking, and are we concerned we will not have enough vaccine for our summer population if that's happening?
It shouldn't be a concern. I'll let Gary answer some of the logistics questions on the amount of vaccine, but we are a state pod. Pod is just one of those words that gets overused. Point of dispensing for the state vaccination sites. So we're one of the mass vaccination sites. So we have to accept people from across the state as well. But as far as logistics go, we will be receiving vaccines on the same cadence for as long as we request it. So it shouldn't be an issue as far as running out of vaccine, but I'll let Gary answer the logistics question on that.
Yeah, Matt, I would actually say thank you to those that have come from off island to get vaccines, primarily because just because the governor has delayed rolling out the next phases for probably the last week and a half. We vaccinated most everybody in the phase that wanted it, and we've had doses that, quite frankly, were being used by folks coming from offshore. So, now that the doors are open and we can see really a march forward, we'll get the vaccine, and because of the eligibility, if you have an appointment, you'll get a vaccine. We just haven't seen an increased need right now because the phase was delayed in starting. So I don't think anybody's lost it, but I'm happy to get a vaccine into everyone's arm that the state authorizes at any time.
Christy?
Thank you. And I think that's a good question we've all been receiving is as we go into this summer season, how do we vaccinate our staff? And this is something I asked Jericho today and just wanted to touch on as well, that if people are coming to the island, what's the recommendation if they should be vaccinated first or getting vaccinated here? I know there's some concerns about split dosing.
Well, it's probably a Roberto question, but I'll take a stab at it. If you're in the state and you receive a vaccine, there's not a border line, other than being in the state to get your vaccine. You have to have your card, and you usually would have to have a schedule. So the sites would want to schedule it back at their sites. But we're going to use common sense in this. And if we have doses and they're on a schedule, then we'll do it.
Yep, and I'll echo that. We have to do the doses as we go. We do have to request that second dose.
Right.
So the more information that if people can get to us ahead of time, so that we know that information that it's going to happen, we are asking that people do it get their second dose where they got their first dose. But if they have to do their second dose here, we do need to know how many second doses to request. So that requires a phone call as well. But yes, everything Gary said was correct.
Matt?
Yeah, well, we're requesting that the employees, at least from or any employee, we're asking them to try to get vaccinated at home, because then they don't have to come here and quarantine. If they're coming from out of state, they're still required to come within 72 hours, et cetera. Some of that is being, in my opinion, is a little crazy, because people can get a test on a Friday, party in Florida for 2 days and then show up here on, Sunday night, Monday morning. And, they're still quote unquote legal, even though they've, been in the bars for 2 straight nights, but which is a little crazy. But, but we're asking the employees to get their vaccinations at home, and then they can forego it when they get here. So, we're sort of working around it.
I think that's the right strategy, Matt.
Sorry.
I was just going to say, I think that's the right strategy, Matt, is to see what can be done before people arrive, and that way we don't have to worry about isolation and PCR testing.
That's the best way to do it.
Jason, you had your hand up.
Yeah, just on the agricultural option, would landscapers or gardeners fall underneath that?
So we did ask the state that specifically for that issue. The landscapers and gardeners would only qualify under this if they meet the state agricultural definition, which means that they need to be growing their own flowers, growing their own food, things like that. So anyone from the nurseries, the farms, things like that, a person who shows up to do work for something that's already there but doesn't grow their own, unfortunately doesn't qualify yet. We did specifically ask that.
Okay, so a follow-up, if someone works for a company, maybe they don't grow those flowers, but they grow flowers there, just to make an example, and this person comes in and plants them, they would still qualify.
Yes, correct.
But if I'm just mowing grass or building a stone wall, okay.
Unfortunately, no, we did ask because we want to get as many needles in arms as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And Mike Coughlin did say no. And I do have Baker's roadmap here. So it's March 22nd, people age 60 and above, plus the workers from that eligibility list that I sent in. April 5th is people age 55 and older, and anyone with one comorbidity or more. And then on April 19th, it opens to the general public, which is phase 3. So it is a lot faster. It is really frustrating that that they said landscapers and construction workers don't fall into this, but it is 3.5 weeks from now, 4.5 weeks from now. So it is frustrating, but it's also not as far away as we had originally thought it would be.
Brooke Moore has her hand up. Brooke?
Hi, thank you, Dawn. This is a very technical follow-up, Roberto, but if someone grows plants, vegetable gardens for clients, would that qualify?
Technically, yes.
Thank you.
That it's the technicality issues. You know, it's one of those things that are so interesting is, for example, when things first started, when this phase opened up, I qualified because technically I am obese. I have a BMI of 33, but a body fat percentage of way lower than obesity. That's a kind of a jerk move for me to have accepted a vaccine because of that. So I didn't do it, but technically I do count. So yes, there is a lot of technicalities like that. I qualify for other medical issues, but that's a completely different story. But yeah, there is those technicalities that we are seeing. For example, one of the other things of in all of these phases, so in the early stages of phase 2, when it was asking for 2 comorbidities, one of those comorbidities was asthma. It just said asthma. So when we asked the state, you know, define asthma, is it only severe asthma or is it all asthmas? They had originally said all asthma, including exercise induced, which is a very mild form of asthma, but it did count. Those are all technicalities that count.
So I'll just add this, Roberto. When you go out to the website, you know, you go through the criteria when you register to get the vaccine, and you attest to what you see the criteria are that are listing there. It's a personal decision related to how you attest, because there are so many variables in between. But you make your own decision, and you know, if you show up in our vaccine line, you're scheduled, you've attested, you're getting a vaccine. So it's a very personal moment, and it's generally a very happy moment when people come in.
Can I move on to the next item, or are there? Okay.
So Madam Chair, just one last thing. I would just ask that now that we know we're moving into other phases, when we had opening of the past phases, the first day or two, vaccine doses would get scheduled within 15 or 20 minutes, for a whole week. And then as the zones got bigger, the first 24 hours usually filled up very fast. And then we had issues of filling for 4 or 5 days where we had many openings and started to have people call others that we knew wanted the vaccine that are eligible, but just hadn't gone out there to sign up. So that's how we were filling it. That's not going to be the case anymore, I will guarantee you. When this starts to open now, the blaster doors, the jetpack is going. And so if you need a vaccine, get on that website as soon as you can. And don't get discouraged if you don't get it right away. There are going to be enough vaccines to get you in pretty quickly. And just look for those appointments, keep going out there, keep refreshing your browser if you need to. But it's out there, you'll be able to get in, I guarantee it.
Thank you. Economic Task Force update, Christy.
Thank you. We had a quick meeting today. We actually met with Jericho to talk about how to get the information out to employers about vaccinating their employees. And he, of course, went over a lot of the new information from the governor today. We also discussed that Jericho and the health department in Valencia put together a info sheet for kind of the safety of the vaccine that employers could use to provide to their employees to encourage them to sign up. So that's available on the town website, and we will be putting it on the Economic Task Force website as well. What else? Oh, we talked about parking. We had Officer Mack join our discussions as well today. And we recommend keeping everything in line with the 2019 parking regulation. So it changed a little bit for 2020, but we thought it's best to go back to what it would be like in 2019. We had a lot of discussions around how the season might be shifted a little bit this season. So April and May might be, a little bit slower and calmer, but it will start to pick up. And with wedding season starting to open back up, we think that the fall is going to be a lot busier. So we just think that parking will it's always extended through, but enforcement will most likely extend through those September, October moments. And then we talked about the NERDA shuttle bus. We're trying to put together a commuter bus, which we've been working with Libby and Janet to put together something with Paula and the NRTA. So we're hoping that that will be finalized soon, and we'll have a direct shuttle from 2 fairgrounds to the downtown area for the times that is most needed for businesses. So cross our fingers that we're making progress, and we'll hopefully have a report back to the select board soon. And then valet will be back again this season. And so that was another thing that we want businesses to know, that, we basically discussed that it's going to be a very successful summer, busy summer. And we talked a lot about kind of how to keep everybody safe and keep that information out to businesses. And then we want to work on getting outdoor dining up and going. So I know that is going to come to select board next week. We talked about when that should start, when that should end. And so we'll all be discussing all of that next week. And that's everything we discussed today. Oh, and the Keep the Rock Solid grant is still open till the end of the month. And we really encourage businesses to apply. It's over $150,000 of grants that can go to our small business owners.
How many applications have you gotten?
I don't know the total number. It's been a few, but what tends to happen with businesses is they apply at the last moment. So it's due, Melissa, correct me if I'm wrong, it's the 29th.
Yeah, I think they've gotten under 10 applications done, and it's actually over $200,000, Christy. We've got the town funding, sponsorship funding from the canceled Daffodil Parade, and then of course funding from Remain. So yeah, applications are open till March 29th. I know that a lot of businesses are working directly with Karen Maycumber to craft their application. So more have been in touch with her than have applied to date, but I think we're going to see a healthy response.
That's great.
And the task force is getting ready to put some information on our website about kind of possible tech resources or consultants on the island that you could use to create a website or improve your business plan. So I think that will help the businesses maybe ask for a grant for those resources once they know kind of what the options are out there. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay. Not seeing any. Licensing administrator, Amy.
Hi, thank you. Quick updates. As Christy mentioned, I know originally we had thought we might review some things with outdoor dining this week, but we've moved that to next week. Still getting in some applications. So we're refining that, and we'll be reviewing all the private spaces for approval next week, and then giving you a preview of all the street closures and public property spaces, and kind of see anything we need to refine there, hoping to have approval and ability to do that into late April timing. So we will have that for you next week. One other update, on Monday, as we've discussed, the gatherings limit will change. Effective on March 22nd, again, the gatherings limit will increase, and the difference will be by definition of the location. For licensed event venues and public settings, the gatherings limit will go to 100 people indoors and 150 people outdoors, subject to sector-specific protocols like seated food service, 6 people per table, 6 feet apart, on top of those numbers. So those protocols still need to be followed. And in private settings, such as private residences, it is still at 10 indoors and 25 outdoors. Just quickly, we met with the event community this week to review this because of the discrepancy between those two things. And we will be further meeting with them to have a process for application for permits and such, being that the definition of event venue or public setting includes any setting that's open to the public, any licensed venue, park space, or private space, including homes that are used for gatherings through lease, license, permit, contract, reservation, or similar agreement. So we're going to work on that and work with those folks hosting events in that type of setting to have a permit process for them, as should be even regardless of COVID, but in order to meet this definition for the new gatherings limit. So we're working through that, and hopefully that'll have a good outcome. And by the time most of these things happen, this will change and we'll probably be a little bit closer, but it's a good exercise. We will do that, and hopefully that'll help some folks out there that were nervous. The things that this applies to, if you're having an event or gathering with your friends, your daughter's getting married in the backyard, unfortunately, at this moment in time, if it happens now, that would be considered private and the lower gathering limits. So any questions on that? Good.
Anybody? No. Oh, Jason. Jason has a question.
Sorry, Madam Chair, I'm using the raise hand function now. Thought it'd be easier to see. It's more of a comment. I just wanted to say what a great job that Amy and the licensing staff is doing, reaching out to all the businesses ahead of time. It's very proactive. I've gotten really good comments that, even though they might not love where we're at with COVID, but they like the access to the information and trying to understand so they can plan. And I think, Christy and your team for the Economic Task Force is doing the same thing, whether it's bringing in Sergeant Mack. And I just think we're doing a really phenomenal job of reaching out in a proactive way. So I just wanted to say thank you for everyone taking that approach.
Thank you everyone for the support too. It's been great. Even though most of our answers are, we don't know. So thank you. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, thank you. And last item under this section is, are there any other reports, comments, or updates? I think we've probably covered everything. All right, thanks everyone. Next, by Roberto. Next, public comment for items not related to COVID-19 or other agenda items. I believe that Scott Shell has his hand up with a public comment, and then I have one from Tucker Holland. Scott?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Great, thank you all. I appreciate everybody's time. So actually this is sort of COVID related. Well, it's very much COVID related. So the reason why I'm, commenting, and I got a few questions, is that my mother was recently evicted along with, and she's 71. Well, she'll be 71 in 4 days, and she has COPD, and she's a primary care provider for my nephew who is type 1 diabetic. And I don't obviously fault the sheriff's department, because I work with the sheriff's department in San Francisco, and I'm aware if they have to execute an order, they have to execute an order. I am concerned, however, that I know that the governor had lifted the moratorium on evictions. However, per CDC, it was extended to the 31st of this month. And she was evicted on the 24th of last month. And so obviously that's very concerning to me. It's my mom and my nephew, and they're currently homeless. And this was directly an impact of COVID. My mother intended on driving taxi, and then COVID hit. So there was no cabs to drive. So she wasn't going to drive cab. So she fell behind on her rent. So she's been evicted. I currently have them in a hotel in Hyannis. And I do work with the sheriff's department, not for. So I'm basically a social worker. I run a violence intervention and prevention program. And I'm a contract employee. So I have a modest income, to say the least. So my questions are like, how can this happen, right? For one, in a pandemic, and how can this happen on Nantucket? I mean, in San Francisco, we have, probably 10,000 people homeless, right? I believe there's close to 30,000 people in the greater Bay Area that are homeless. Nantucket is obviously a smaller community. And so I'm concerned that this can even happen there, right? It is my hometown. I am a native. I love Nantucket. I'm a proud Nantucketer. My family goes back to the original purchasers. I'm a coffin. So, you know, I mean, I believe there's salt and sand in my blood. I am a native through and through. But I'm really concerned, and I'm wondering what safety net, why is there no safety net that a elderly woman with an illness and my nephew who's type 1 diabetic, how can they just be cast out on the street and there's no safety net for them or people in their situation? That's a real concern to me. And I'm just curious, you know, what there's no emergency housing options available. I mean, I understand housing is an issue everywhere, and particularly on Nantucket, it's challenging. I get that. However, in this situation, it is an emergency, and it's cold outside. It's not as cold here where I'm living in California, but I know it's cold there. So that's my comment and my questions. Obviously, I don't expect anyone to answer right now. I mean, if you have any resources, it would be greatly appreciated. I don't know how long I can afford to keep my mother in a hotel. So that's what's going on with my family. And so I'm concerned. And I know that there is a large portion of folks for such a small community that are in fact homeless on Nantucket, right? It's more than you would realize, and certainly a lot more so in the summer months, right, when it's warmer out. So this is a real big concern for everybody, for the community as a whole, but certainly for me right now personally, with my family having nowhere to go. So I guess that about covers what I have to say. I appreciate everybody's time.
Scott, I really appreciate you coming on. I know you recognize that we don't necessarily have a lot of answers for you tonight, but I know your mother. I know Hayden. He's in my son's class, and I'm really shaken personally by hearing all of this. We'll see what we can look into for you.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Tucker Holland had a public comment as well.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I first would like to also thank Scott for sharing that with us tonight. The reason I have my hand raised for this section is I wanted to just put on the community's radar that the Affordable Housing Trust, as folks are aware, is revising the housing production plan for the town. And the second webinar in conjunction with that will take place on Tuesday, March 30th at 4:30 p.m. The link to join and so forth will be on the town website shortly. This is the session where feedback from the over 1,300 surveys that were filled out, the focus groups that the consultants conducted, and input from the Affordable Housing Trust will be shared in a consolidated manner by the consultants, and we are looking for the community's further feedback as we refine what are our priorities for housing production of all types. And that would probably include the type of thing that Scott was addressing earlier. So we really hope that people will participate in that webinar again on Tuesday, March 30th at 4:30 p.m. Thank you.
Thank you, Tucker. Linda Williams also has her hand raised.
I've been on the Housing Authority a long time. I've been involved with housing for years. I do know Scott's mother. I've known her for 45 years, and his brother. And the problem here, most of you weren't alive back then, but back in the 70s, early 80s, there was Section 8 housing here. There were a couple of units at the beachside way back in the day. Then the Nantucket Inn out at the airport, when it was first constructed, they had some Section 8 housing during the winter. The problem is that the closest Section 8 housing, which would address this situation, is in Hyannis and not here anymore, because obviously real estate costs have changed, the land use has changed. The Housing Authority doesn't have any emergency housing. It could be that maybe the Housing Trust could help the Housing Authority come up with some of those Section 8 units. But right now, anybody in this kind of a need would have to go to Hyannis to get that kind of housing. It is a big gap here, especially during the pandemic and rents going out of the, way up too high for a lot of people. His mother isn't young anymore. None of us are really, that we've grown up here for years. And we really need to address Section 8 housing or emergency housing here. Scott brings up a good point. It's just that we have not been able to come up with a plan for it. I hope Tucker and the Housing Trust, maybe working with the Housing Authority, can come up with something to address that particular need, that somebody doesn't have to get on a boat late in the day and go try to find housing on the Cape because they all of a sudden become housing challenged. So I think it's good that Scott's bringing it up, and it's a lot of us know his mother, and I think it's a real problem here. So I think we should address that part of the community as well as everybody else.
Thank you, Linda. Are there any other public comments this evening? I'm seeing none. There's no new business that I'm aware of. We'll move on to approval of minutes, warrants, and pending contracts. I think that there was an alteration to the minutes, but Matt, I believe that Erica took care of that edit for you.
Yeah, no, I made one, I put the details that I shared at the meeting into the minutes. But with that, move approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor by roll call: Melissa Murphy,
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella,
Aye.
Jason Bridges,
Aye.
Matt Fee,
Aye.
Don Holgate, aye. That carries unanimously. Treasury warrants.
Move approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor by roll call: Melissa Murphy,
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella,
Aye.
Jason Bridges,
Aye.
Matt Fee,
Aye.
Don Holgate, aye. That motion carries unanimously. Next up, we have pending contracts, and I just wanted to mention, and there may be other questions or comments on the contracts, that the board met on Town Manager Libby Gibson's contract, and we have renewed her contract for 3 years. She's agreed to stay on for another 3-year contract, and we greatly appreciate it. And she also took a leadership stance and requested to not have a salary increase this year, which we really appreciated with the unknown economic impacts due to COVID. And we did give her a raise in the 2 subsequent years in relation to what other town managers are paid. But we really appreciate her and appreciate her staying with us.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments on the contracts? Matt?
Yeah, what was the hazardous waste that's at 131 Pleasant and 20 South Water was one question. And then just the sewer extension money, explain both of those, please.
Sure. So actually, I forgot to mention the hazardous waste abatement at 131 Pleasant and 20 South Water with Ultimate Abatement Company. We actually need to put that off a week. There's an issue with the bid. But what it is for is removal of things like asbestos in both of those buildings before departments move in there. The sewer extension, Matt, do you mean the Weston and Sampson contract? Okay, so that is a contract. It's described as a contract for engineering support related to proposed Nantucket and Warren's Landing sewer extension. David is on to help me with this a little bit, but just quick bit of background. In 2016, there was a special town meeting to seek an appropriation of funding for a sewer extension to Nantucket of $80 million. It failed at the subsequent ballot. After that, the board agreed to engage SMAST, who does our annual water quality testing, to conduct a water quality modeling study of Nantucket and ways in which water quality could potentially be improved without sewering and with sewering. That project finally completed in 2019, and it did get sidetracked because of COVID. So we've been trying to bring it back ever since, and there's just been so many things that have gotten in the way, not to mention a multitude of sewer projects that have been occurring. So this contract really is to review the cost of the project and re-review the route of where the sewer would be extended to. There are some factors that have changed since 2016, not the least of which is the sewer master plan. And sometime soon, hopefully by sometime in April or early May, we are going to have our natural resources director, Jeff Carlson, come on and review with the board the report from SMAST, although it is posted online and it has been online for some time. So basically the contract is to re-review the cost and the route. David, is that about right?
Yes, thank you, Libby. And what it does is, in prior years, we've been planning for a potential return of Nantucket. So in the Nantucket Harbor Shimo project, we put a calculation in there for future capacity in those lines. And we are also designing the third sewer force main from C Street with a primary connection from Nantucket that will tie into the new sewer force main. So we are taking all those into consideration as far as routes go.
Matt, did that answer your questions?
Yeah, move approval.
Do we need to just note that is it the 131 Pleasant?
Yeah, skipping over 131, please.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor by roll call: Melissa Murphy,
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella,
Aye.
Jason Bridges,
Aye.
Matt Fee,
Aye.
Don Holgate, aye. That carries unanimously. Citizen departmental requests. We have letter of support for Habitat for Humanity local initiative. Application for 3 units at 9A and 9B Benjamin Drive for our shy list. Oh, I'm sorry. Before I jump to that, I did have a public hand raised. Bill Grader.
Hi, thank you, Don. I just unmuted myself, and I guess my question is going to kind of moot at this point because you've already voted. Thank you, Matt, for asking a question I had about the sewer explanation. The other question I had was about the budget item for the F Street bulkhead. That bulkhead, the dock itself is supposed to have been done this past year. And obviously that had to be delayed because of the COVID stuff. And so wondering when we're going to have the next update on the next thought process for the F Street dock. You know, was the permitting done anyhow? Does the permitting, if it was done, is there enough time or does it have to be reapplied for? And also the fact that it's been pushed off another year, there needs to be some extensive work done to alleviate the reoccurring safety issues. The plates, these big steel plates that are put down to cover the holes that have occurred because of the undermining. That undermining has grown again, so much so that these big heavy plates, the hole is starting to creep out past the corners of the plates, and you can actually stand on the plates and bounce them up and down. So I don't know if whose budget that's going to come out of because it's a multi-jurisdictional dock, but there obviously is going to need to be some extensive repairs done to get it ready for use. And actually the dock is in use currently with those safety concerns. So, I guess the question is, what is the next update for that dock?
Madam Chair. Actually, I can give you a quick one right now. I'm just reading an email from the police department and marine department that is working on this. The project was delayed for 3 years because of permitting delays. We received all the permits by December 2019 and then put the project out to bid. Bids came back over appropriation. So we planned on the annual town meeting for supplemental funds. COVID happened and the project did not go forward for funding. We have to go back out to bid later this month with hopes for funds at the June town meeting. With delays, we ran out of time with the engineer's contract. This contract on the agenda is really just an extension of the old one. But since we already did an extension last year, we need a whole new one because 30B only lets you do one extension. Meanwhile, we are having a quote, big project update at the board meeting next week with a variety of town projects, and this is one of them.
Bill, are you all set with that?
If I understood that, that means that repairs, which I don't know, is that going to be under a new contract, or is that an emergency repairs, or is that, how is that handled? I guess.
I will have to look into the repairs, the interim repairs that you're talking about. I don't know what the plan is for that at this moment.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Bill. Okay, back to the Habitat Shy Unit application. Tucker?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, this is rather exciting, really. I think the board will recall that they had requested a couple of years ago at this stage when Habitat was looking for land for its next project and had inquired about lots on Waite Drive. As you'll recall, the town has adopted a policy that really that any town-owned property that would be going toward housing creation, we wanted to count on the subsidized housing inventory list. And at that point, Habitat, their units, while they met the income requirement, could not qualify. And they have done a tremendous amount of work in conjunction with the Department of Housing and Community Development, in conjunction with Habitat of Cape Cod, and with the town here to modify their processes in order to have all of their units going forward count on the 10% list. So this is the first application for units that they are creating, which would be eligible to count toward our subsidized housing inventory. They are doing this under the local initiative program, as the land that is being provided by the housing authority for this was actually part of the comprehensive permit originally in conjunction with Satcham's Path. So tonight we're hoping that you will enthusiastically endorse this letter of support for their LIP application to the HCD, as well in conjunction with it. As you all know, 40B projects can be done by for-profit and nonprofit developers, and the process allows for a waiver of an appraisal requirement in the case of nonprofit developers, and therefore there is a letter as well we would ask for you to support with respect to the waiver for the appraisal requirement for DHCD. Thank you.
Matt?
I want to thank Habitat. It's great that they got this done, and move approval of both items.
Second.
All those in favor by roll call: Melissa Murphy?
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella?
Aye.
Jason Bridges?
Aye.
Matt Fee?
Aye.
Don Holgate, aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. This is great. Jason?
Yeah, I just want to say I can remember the countless conversations with Habitat board members and Christy trying to figure, Tucker too, everybody trying to figure this out, like how to get these on. So this is a ton of work and a really, really great news. And I don't think if there wasn't the focus and all the hard work from many, many, many people, this wouldn't be happening. So I'm glad this was solved. Nice work.
Thank you. Agreed. Human Services contract review. Committee. Review of recommendations for allocation of Health and Human Services funding for FY 2022. Dorothy Hertz is here with us this evening. Hi, Dorothy.
Hi, how's everybody doing? Good.
Yep. Do you want to just do a quick run through of the list?
If you'd like, I just would like to just touch upon maybe a few little items before we start.
That's great.
Okay, and we really want to applaud what we've seen as far in the year of the pandemic of the community and their outreach to the Interfaith Council for food, rental, and housing. It has been a true sign of what the community is made of and the impact and that each individual makes in making these programs work. And I think everybody should applaud themselves for how they have supported it at a time when they really needed it. And we also wanted to mention that we've watched the human service providers reinvent themselves this year, and it's really been amazing to see them find a way to have their programs continue to run through the pandemic with some of them with no stoppage in service, which was really commendable. The other thing that we noticed was that we had a pandemic within this pandemic this year, which should be notable. And that was the rise in both substance abuse, domestic violence, and mental health. And that we know is due to the impact of the isolation, role changing for people, and the uncertainty of what COVID-19 was bringing for the community. We also saw some concerning factors in the isolation that went on for everybody. Without the ability for educators, friends, just the general public to see each other, it brought on higher substance abuse, mental health issues, behavioral health issues, and domestic violence. And that is concerning for us because what happens when educators begin to be able to see the students and we begin to see the impact it's actually had on families. And when teachers are able to start, or educators are able to start identifying people for both the domestic violence and mental health, where we'll be. And when adults begin to realize that what they're seeing, they're trying to hold it together, but maybe it's okay to reach out and say, I can't do it. So that's concerning. One of the great things we've seen this year was we saw the beginning of collaboration between these private nonprofits that we hadn't seen before. And I think that should, it's the groundwork for what could be possibly available for them at state, local, and federal funding if they continue to collaborate better on their grants process and anything. So because through collaboration, we all know that there's more money available. And that I want everybody to understand, when we did these allocations of fundings this year, we actually really spent a lot of time in understanding that the services that would be rendered and beneficial to the community were what we supported. And we had to look into the fact that some of these organizations were unable to do fundraising, and getting certain grants are very difficult during the pandemic. And for a lot of them, a lot of the smaller ones, the fundraising is vital during our summer months. They run some very big fundraising programs and they just couldn't do it. So we're very thankful for the $650,000 that you allocated, or the town management allocated towards human services. We know that it is deeply appreciated by everybody that is getting the services provided. So as we go through, you will see that we had a request from a Safe Place for $55,000. We went with that request. That is we're hoping for allocation. The Alliance for Substance Abuse asked us for $50,000. We made a recommendation for the $50,000. Elder Services of Cape Cod has asked for 20. We went with that Health imperatives was a request for 90,000, and we supported the 90,000 there. Fair Winds asked for 176,323. We supported that allocation of monies. The Martha's Vineyard Community Service was 18,000 again. We supported that. South Coast Legal Services was 4,600. We supported that. The Interfaith Council asked us for 85,000. We are making a request for 70,000 for the Interfaith Council. The Nantucket Cottage Hospital Services, which actually in their grant also incorporates the ambulatory services. We went with funding completely the ambulatory services and the other funds going to the social service department. So from the 211,123.34, we are suggesting $130,671.20 be allocated there. Small Friends, we're requested 15,000. We are approving the 15,000. We're making a recommendation for 15,000. The Artists Association, which was our new one for last year and had a very successful year, did ask for 22,001. We level funded them at the 18,200 from last year. Cape Mediation was a request for $2,205.80, and we made the recommendation to support that. Are there any questions?
I can't see everyone. Is anybody, Melissa, then Christy?
I'm sure that we're all going to say something similar, but no questions, Dorothy. Just a whole lot of thanks to you and the Contract Review Committee and Council for Human Services. Everything you said was on point. This was an extraordinary year, and I'm grateful that we're able to fund at this level again this year. So thank you for all your work.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Christy, then Matt.
Yes, very similar to Melissa, just a thank you and the rest of the committee for reviewing these and the great work that you do. It's great to hear the increase in collaboration across the nonprofits. I really enjoyed the report that you put forward, and I'm wondering if it's possible to have that on the town website. It had a lot of really great statistics about our community. And just, I think it'd be nice to revert back to maybe this, in the coming years or so. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Christy. Matt?
Yeah, that was similar. Christie's that was similar to what I was going to say. Some of the information was enlightening, to say the least. The number, we have more kids than the state believes we have a population. Was, that one kind of jumped out at me. And then the change in the demographics. I think the things that, whenever we go to the state and try to sort of make our case, they think of Nantucket as a bunch of, rich white guys with billion-dollar homes. And I think that the reality is, much as we all know that live here, is much different. And I think Christie's suggestion to put that on the website, and potentially if we have things that we're, sort of asking, I think people need to realize, what is really here and how much help we really do need. So I thank you. It was really well done.
Thank you, Matt. I would like to say, oh, am I allowed to speak?
Oh, yeah, I just wanted to say how incredibly thorough you always are and how much we appreciate it. And I'd love to see us fund more programs. But go ahead, Dorothy.
Okay, sorry. Matt, I would like to say to you that, yes, I think the biggest thing that jumped out to me, there was a lot of data. I spent probably a month and a half on research on it. It's a little concerning that we've changed so rapidly in our demographics and how we can actually sustain that. And how do we work it? Because a lot of communities where this has happened before, the communities have died, and we don't want that. So and they are tourist communities. So I would really love to see us address it in a more open discussion. And how do we, I know it's part of some of the stuff coming up in our housing bills are, where do we stand? You know, there's a need for housing, but, you know, there's also the philosophy of how much can we actually sustain it the right way, and even the human service providers. So it's a little shocking. So that was my feedback. And, you know, I would read stuff and I'd be like, no, wait a minute, but it's there.
Matt?
I probably wouldn't have used the term die, but I think that's not too extreme. I think we are in a precarious situation, and it's happening more quickly and more deeply and broadly than we may want to admit. And, you know, financial forces are very strong. And how are we going to, you know, sort of, how do you slow that down? I don't have the answer, but I think you're completely right.
And the only other comment I'd like to make is we had a great board this year. We had 2 new members, but it was great to have a little bit different diversity in the board, and have them ask questions, which made us dig a little further into our process for them and spend a little bit more time on some of the things. So it was a great year.
That's great to hear. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Anybody else? Okay. Next, we have town manager's report.
Thank you. So I can get through this pretty quickly. I'm just really going to focus on the items in bold. This is just really meant to be kind of an update for the board about what things we've been working on most actively. The Nantucket Water Quality Plan I mentioned during the pending contracts, that is going to be coming before the board pretty soon in a little bit more detail. The facilities master plan, we have not had a chance yet to get back to the big facilities master plan, but when the board was meeting earlier in November and January to discuss it, it was generally agreed that concessions would be kind of their own facilities master plan. And the concession planning effort will be led by the facilities director, working with the Park and Recreation Commission and other stakeholders for input, as discussed pretty thoroughly at the board meeting 2 or 3 weeks ago about the jetties concession. And that will include coastal resiliency, historic preservation, other maybe the concessionaires or prior concessionaires, meant to be pretty comprehensive. Baxter Road long-term planning. We executed a contract with Arcadis at a meeting in February, and we expect an update on that process in early April. A lot of meetings obviously go on all week. Town meeting and election planning is well underway, including the outdoor venue. The finance director and I meet with the FinCom chair and vice chair every other week about warrant articles. So that's been really helpful. The Mass Municipal Managers Association, I think I mentioned to you earlier, I was able to get myself appointed to their DEI task force, and I was asked to be a speaker at an event in April called Women Leading Government. I'm excited about that. PFAS communications and planning is quite active, and there are meetings possibly daily on this, but at minimum more than once a week. The commuter shuttle, as Christy mentioned earlier, is something that we've been working on with the NRTA to get in place for the summer. And Rob has set up a solid waste long-term planning meeting weekly, which Christy has been a part of. Thank you, Christy, for participating in that. A lot of projects going on. As I mentioned earlier, the board will get a quote big projects update on some of the bigger projects at your meeting next week. Meanwhile, on some other projects, Island Home, we are having stakeholder and community forums held this month. And once those are complete, our facilitator will put together some findings and present them to the board, hopefully sometime in April. The solar project at the water company, there's ongoing response to a neighbor group that has expressed some concerns, and hopefully those will get resolved. The police reform bill, we are preparing to review kind of an implementation like plan or implementation issues and updates at a meeting in April or May. The 2021 NCA forum, I need to get back to them. They emailed me last week, I think, about scheduling a meeting. So as the board knows, we normally have the NCA forum, Nantucket Community Association, in July, early July. We did it virtually last year, and I think we might be doing that again. So I'm going to put out a date for you all to look at, hopefully next week. Waite Drive is about to get underway, the construction of that road, which will lead from Tacoma down to the Two Fairgrounds parking lot, and then there will be a cut through there. That's getting going very shortly. And we are working hard to resurrect the plastics ban, outreach confirmation that it is an active ban and compliance needs to be initiated if it has not already been. And those are some of the most recent things we've been working on.
Any questions or comments? Okay, I can't see everyone, but oh, now I'm not seeing any hands. Any board committee reports this evening? Okay, seeing that. Oh, Christy?
Sorry, I didn't realize it was coming this early in the agenda. It's a quick update from the NPDC met this past Monday, and the state has a transportation improvement plan, the TIP funding that we do a 5-year plan every year. And we missed out on it this year because we don't have a transportation planner, and the committee was kind of asking, and so I'm bringing this to the select board to ask if it'd be possible to hire a consultant in the meantime while we're waiting to hire a transportation planner. So I just wanted to bring that forward, and I think that Libby and Andrew could work together if that was something that we recommended. We also were able to approve a build-out analysis, which is going to be mostly funded from the state, from district local technical assistance funds. And so this is going to be able to see kind of what the maximum capacity of build-out will be on different lots. And we talked a lot about the data sources that they use and encouraging them to try to use some local data sources and not just the census, since that doesn't always relate to Nantucket, as we've discussed a lot tonight. We're continuing to update area plans, and we've encouraged all of the subcommittees to try to reach out into their community and find a little bit more diversity in those subcommittees. A lot of the area plans are formed with just homeowners, so we encourage them to kind of go back to the drawing board and look for some renters, and maybe longtime renters, summer renters, but also year round, just to get more diverse thought on what those communities want to look like in the future. And that is everything that we discussed. Oh, no, one more. And a transportation manager position is going to be created, and that's in hopes of being able to fill that position, and it will kind of overlook a transportation planner and our energy consultants. So it was a good meeting, and we had a lot of really great discussions about solar and future growth, and just wanted to bring those updates back.
Thanks, Christy. Melissa, then Matt.
Thanks so much. And thanks to Christy and all the NP and EDC members. That was a 4.5-hour meeting on Monday night. I've only gotten through about 2 hours on YouTube. So kudos to you for sticking it out. I just wanted to let the board know 2 things. One, this is a sort of citizen update. The Civic League, We Can, Women Engaged in Civic Action on Nantucket, and Brooke Moore, as a representative from the Council for Human Services, are working on increasing civic engagement opportunities for people in our community to create more equity on our board representation across the board through elected process and appointments process. So stay tuned for more information on that, but we certainly encourage anybody who has questions about how to run or just general questions and interest in seeking a seat to contact Charlie Stott and Peter Morrison on the Civic League. They're hosting a lot of centralizing the information, including mentorship. So if anybody on this board or any board who's listening tonight is interested in mentoring a potential candidate, please reach out to them also, because what we find is that oftentimes barriers to participation are just a lot of assumptions, and having somebody help guide them through the process leads to a lot of success. And secondly, I just wanted to publicly announce that the Chamber of Commerce has announced a new president CEO, Robin Kirk. She'll be here on island full-time on April 15th, and I'll be transitioning out at the end of this month. So I just wanted to let you all know that. Thanks.
Matt and Jason?
Yeah, Remain has been sponsoring some Resilient Nantucket. They've done, Envision Resilient Nantucket, a series of different Zoom meetings that have been pretty interesting. One in particular, if people get a chance, there's a Dr. Hill who spoke, and it's at the 59-minute mark. It's about halfway through the one that she spoke at, and she was very good. And she emphasizes we need a sediment transfer plan, transfer study to know where the sand goes and when. She also showed how the Dutch put tons of sand on beaches, and then in over 5, 10, 20 years, that sand moves around and then they do it again. And so those pictures were particularly interesting. And then she spent some time talking about sort of Brant Point and what's going to happen. And it's interesting, even if we are able to stop the water from coming into Brant Point, sea level rise itself is going to lift the water table, which, I've known, but her example of it was very clear. And so even if you stop the water from flowing into Brant Point, you're going to still have to pump it out, or at some point you're going to have to learn to live with it. And so, and she actually had a study, it was from New Jersey, I think. And there was a study saying if the water went up 3 feet, if it rose 3 feet, the water table went up 3 feet close to shore, and it was 2.5 feet 3 miles away. So it really, there's some interesting aspects that we are in this, and so building basements in those areas and is not a very good idea. And I think that those we have to get. And it was great to see her put some other ideas like the sand for some of the areas. The other part that's interesting is the most vulnerable areas are going to be CO2, which is going to impact the harbor, which we all know, and sort of the galls and the haulover. Those are going to be very difficult situations to deal with. And the conservation is looking at them now. They're trying to figure out how they're going to deal with it. And we as a town have to be thinking about it. So it's really worth looking. Coastal Resiliency all has the link. We'll all be dealing with it and talking about it. But it's important enough, I think, for people who have interest in it to hunt it up. Her name is Dr. Hill, and she's on the Remain website. It's worth the hour of time. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. Jason?
I was just going to comment on something Melissa said. Maybe I've heard there's discussion of trying to remove some of the hurdles for people to run for elected office. And one thing that I heard that, made so much sense was being able to get 5, 10, 20 people who are educated in how to be a treasurer for somebody to run and navigate through all of the state requirements. I was really lucky to have somebody volunteer and knew all that stuff and could do the work, but that's a major hurdle. And I know that's in discussion. So I think that and everything else that you all are talking about, Melissa, is going to be really helpful for people. Just removing those hurdles so it's not so scary, or understanding like how to run for elected office. It's be really helpful.
Thanks. I'll just let you know that they're creating a video series. We've got sort of short-term track and long-term track. And I think, in the long term, you'll see a video series of different people who have held office to just talk about the process, their experience, and then also hosting some interviews with people. So sort of ask those questions. So it's a start of a really good process, and I hope that that we see, not necessarily just in this election cycle, but over the next 3 to 5 years, increased diversity on our boards.
Thank you for doing that. I think it'll be really, really helpful to people. Can I move on to our public hearing this evening, if everyone's done with committee reports? We have a public hearing to consider the appeal of Ellen and Dudley Hardy and Joshua Hardy of the Historic District Commission disapproval of a certificate of appropriateness for rooftop solar panels for property located at 83 and 85 Eel Point Road. Let me.
Sorry, I'm realizing I didn't put the process. I'm going to pull it up on the screen right now.
I saw the process in there. I just want to remember the order.
Yep, give me 1 second.
Erica, if you wouldn't mind, could you text me it so I can pull it up on my phone, which won't interrupt my screen?
Yes. Did you get it?
Yes, just got it. Thank you. Opening the public hearing, and we will first go to the appellant to state his or her case and the reason for the appeal. So am I going to you, Michael Wilson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening. And thank you, members of the board and the commissioners from the Historic District Commission who are present tonight. For the record, I am attorney Michael Wilson. I'm appearing on behalf of Ellen and Dudley Hardy and the Hardy family for the denial of the application to the Historic District Commission to install an approximate 650 square foot black rooftop solar array on a black asphalt shingled roof. I'm going to ask the board tonight to find that the denial was not based on either a legally tenable ground or find that it was unreasonable, whimsical, capricious, or arbitrary. And that is commonly known as the arbitrary and capricious standard. That's the standard that applies to this board's review of the commission. And I think town council can confirm that, but I can also provide Madam Chair with legal citation that that is the standard. I'm going to ask the board to make that finding based on the information that was available to the Historic District Commission on the night they made their denial, as well as the same information that you have before you in your packets. Specifically, one of your packets has a photo or a page with 3 photos in it. And I think that is helpful and illustrative to follow along with. They refer to the approvals for rooftop solar arrays located at 6 Washington Avenue in Nantucket, 6A Washington Avenue in Nantucket, thank you, Erica, and 11 Pond Road in the Meadowview area. With respect to the approval for 6 Washington Street, it was a black 3-tab roof, and there was an approval with respect to the application as submitted. The top photo on this chalk, I will refer to it, shows a picture taken of the structure at 6 Washington Avenue from the public way. The second photo is an aerial shot because it also encompasses the second approval I'm going to discuss, which you have, which is 6A Washington Avenue. But I think it's helpful and illustrative to show just how proximate the house is at 6 Washington Avenue to both A Street and Washington Avenue itself. With respect to the approximate distance to A Street, it looks as though maybe 25 to 30 feet. And you can see the modest walkway to Washington Avenue, 40 to 50 feet perhaps. With respect to, and that was approved. The photo in 6 shows a black solar roof array that covers likely 90% of the south-facing roof, the front of the building that faces Washington Avenue. 6A Washington Avenue is with respect to the structure that is at the end of what I would suggest is a white clamshell driveway, and that is the like a shed structure. But I also think it's helpful to show just how proximate it is likewise to Washington Avenue, how visible it is from Washington Avenue and likely A Street, given it's not vegetated on either run. That was similarly approved, and they just wanted the 3-tab black roofing, which is what's been proposed and the case before you. With respect to 11 Pond Road, you can see it's the bottom picture on that chalk. That solar array covers nearly all of the roof plane on which it's installed. It is on the front of the house. I would submit faces south for maximum efficiency. And you can scale from that photo, if you will. I would submit that vehicle depicted in front of the driveway is probably, we'll give it a generous 20 feet. That building from the public way is probably 60 to 70 feet from Pond Road. The decision to approve was conditioned on the applicant installing 2 deciduous trees and to make sure that the roof was black to match the array color and to add molding around the edge of the solar array, arguably to tie it into the roof itself. That was for 700 square foot array. You have another approval in your packet that is not benefited by a photo, and that's with respect to the property at 3A Rachel Drive. That is similarly a rooftop solar array. The board approved it, but requested screening on the street side. The next one is the approval for 75 Pochick Avenue. That is for a roof-mounted solar array. The commission approved it, but it's interesting. They said, I'm hoping I'm reading this correctly, it's cursive, not to set a precedent, approved due to remote location. I don't think just stating that you don't want to set a precedent takes it out of the status of being precedent. But I do note the approval had some bearing on the remote location. The minutes, which you also have in your packet, for the application hearing date of January 19th, 2021, and that's the night that the Hardee's application was denied. The application just before it, Sam Slozik's application for 16 Pippin's Way, there is the comment, this was approved. Commissioner Coombs said she doesn't think this will be noticeable from Pulpus Road unless you stop and look. And when the rest of the farm goes solar, it will blend in, arguably with the other solar panels. It is important for our farms to have relief on electrical bills. Commissioner Welch stated, it's distant enough that it overrides his concern. Visibility. With respect to the application that was denied, Erica, if you could, there is a chalk. It's a aerial view of the proposed array for the project at Eel Point Road. In that chalk, you can see that this is a multiple mast structure. So the roof is not one plane like you have in the 6 Washington Road or the full plane that was used on 11 Pond Road. Thank you, Erica. That's it. Thank you. So that was the application. This is the artistic rendering of what the Hardys had proposed. You can see that they've utilized 2 separate roof planes because there is no one consistent roof plane. The guidelines suggest that as a plus when it comes to considering solar roof array applications. There's another chalk, Erica, if you could. It's a larger aerial. And I think that's illustrative. That one, maybe go back one. That one shows just how far this structure where this roof array was proposed is from Eel Point Road, the public way. You can't argue at any level that this would be visible from the beach, which I think also qualifies as a public way because the beach is on the north side and this array was proposed to be on the south. I think this photo is helpful because it shows the structure is probably over 300 feet from the public way, significantly different than the approvals in the prior chalk that showed the 3 properties that were very close to the public way. But it's also consistent with the approval basis for Commissioner Welch's decision on the 16 Pippin's Way, Mr. Slozik's application. The distance was enough to override his concern. So we have these approvals for these relatively modest solar arrays, a number of which are residential and one which is commercial. And it would seem, as far as the commercial one goes, if we're to carry forward with that line of reasoning, had the Hardy family wanted more solar panels on the property, then this array, this 650 square foot array, would blend in with the rest of them, which was a basis for voting in favor of the Slozik array at 16 Pippin's Way. They're asking for a modest 650 square foot array to help defray electric costs. I don't think it's appropriate to pick and choose who should benefit from solar arrays. Of course, we believe that farms should benefit from a break in electrical charges, but so should residents. The application that was denied, it simply states that it was denied because it does not meet the solar guidelines. That's all it says. But you can draw out of the minutes for when this application was heard. The very first time it was heard, Commissioner Pohl said, the house to the left of this house draws his attention. He didn't even know that this house was there. He feels this would be de minimis. And that was on September 22nd, 2020. The next time this was substantively addressed was October 8th, 2020. Commissioner Pohl said, berming 2 feet along the eastern side would block the house completely. A naturalized berm would block all of this. Commissioner, bear with me. Commissioner Oliver, who I believe is present, and I do have her minutes. Sorry, here we go. From the third time this application was subsequently addressed on January 19th of 2021, just moments after the 16 Pippins Way Slozek Farm application was approved, said trees, this is Commissioner Oliver. She didn't agree with Commissioner Pohl that vegetation along the road would work, but did say trees near the parking area would be close enough. There was a discussion to continue this hearing yet again. It was held for viewing twice. Some of the commissioners were unable to view it. Some were, where stakes and lines were installed to show the height of the proposed vegetated berm that Commissioner Pohl felt would be perfectly appropriate, and even without it, suggested that this is a de minimis visual impact. All support what I'm asking the board to find here, that this denial is truly inconsistent with the rest of the thoughts and the considerations of the other applications, the comments made by the commissioners who dealt with this application specifically, and to suggest that a 650 square foot black solar array on a black 3-tab asphalt roof, approximately 300 and something feet from the public way in a very remote rural area, which is not earmarked as one of the areas of historical significance that the HDC pays particular attention to, unlike downtown and Sconset and the Nantucket area. To suggest that that denial is anything but arbitrary based on the other approvals, I think is going to be a very difficult argument to make. The Hardys simply want to install a modest roof array on the south-facing plane, a portion of the roof, consistent with all of these other applications, and for all the right reasons. The proposal to vegetate it was acted upon favorably by at least one, if not two, of the commissioners, suggesting that it would disguise this or mitigate the visual impacts. And we all know that that is a standard use. The police department, the public safety complex used it. My office at One Hooper Farm used it. They berm it, and you put some natural vegetation. And any concern, whether it's a handicap ramp in my case, or the size of the public safety complex as far as that building goes, vegetative berms are used regularly. And it was proposed, it was suggested by the applicant, it was proposed by commissioners. And so for all those reasons, I really truly believe that the board would be on solid ground to find that this denial was nothing but arbitrary. And I'd ask you to make that finding, and I thank you for your time.
It looks like Linda Williams has her hand raised.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I am here for the appellants as well. Just a couple of little background. I was involved with developing the solar guidelines. I have no idea how long ago, maybe as many 12 years ago, could be longer. Technology has changed. I've had a discussion with Lauren as well, our energy person. And the technology has changed, the language has changed, the types of roof planes, the colors, everything has changed. They need to be drastically updated, but the sheer volume of applications before the HCC has sort of prevented everybody from addressing it again, because it took us a while to develop them in the first place when I was on the HDC. But it does still mention that the solar panels should be the color of the roof that they're on. In this particular case, we have put them on other roofs, gray roofs, et cetera, and they're black panels for the most part. This is on a black roof. I did measure it. It's over 300 feet from Eel Point Road. It's on a secondary roof plane on top of it, which the solar guidelines does address. So I was even having trouble. I've never been a big solar person, but it is a fact of life, and we're trying to avoid another cable. Even the state law that governs most of the HDC jurisdictions in the state under 40C that has added a whole section on solar panels now. Because our act has been pretty much unchanged for a long time. Our act does not address solar panels at all. So we're still under the solar guidelines, and I say guidelines, and I stress that word guidelines. So I don't think 300 some odd feet on a black roof on a secondary roof plane on top of it is a major detriment to the neighborhood. Last night, as an example, on, I believe, 11 Mississippi in Nantucket, a solar array was put on a south-facing roof facing Arkansas, I think, or Mississippi. I forgot what that road is below it. And it was closer to the road, but it was also on a black roof, and the board didn't seem to have much difficulty with it in Nantucket. This is in an even more rural area, not in Tristram's. And I was kind of surprised that it was denied, or they couldn't come to some sort of agreement. When you do go down Eel Point Road, there is a fairly sizable berm and a lot of growth. So if you're in your car, it's very difficult to see it. Coming at it from either direction, from a distance, you may be able to pick it off. But again, it's a black panel with black edges, and it's not as visible as the old panels used to be, which used to have a very shiny surface and a very shiny edge, which was not the same color generally of the panels back in the day. So I would ask you to overturn them. We got to get a grip on these solar panels one way or the other, or remand it so we can work it out. But we feel that in this particular case, it was arbitrary and capricious, especially in light of what they voted on last night for Mississippi. Thank you.
Michael Wilson, did you want to add one more point before I go to the HDC?
I do. Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to follow up on Ms. Williams' representation, I did secure a copy of the approval from last night. I didn't bring it up in this hearing because it's still subject to the appeal period, but it is in fact a rooftop array located at 11 Mississippi Avenue. And it was a black panel with a black edge on a secondary roof plane and a distance away from the traveled way on Arkansas. If panels are to be allowed, rural areas like this are appropriate and not objectionable if visible. Again, I have to make the record clear, this is still subject to an appeal.
Yes, so submitting new evidence. George, is it okay for them to mention something that was approved last night?
I brought up that I didn't raise it.
Good evening. My internet went out for a minute, so that's my fault. I didn't hear everything you said.
I just wanted to make the board know I did not bring up last night's approval because it's not a final approval. It still has to run through the appeal period. So that's why it was not part of my presentation proper.
Thank you. I do apologize. My internet connection was unstable. I'll go to Diane Coombs now. Diane Coombs on behalf of the HDC.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm asking you first whether this is the time for us to speak.
Don.
Or
yes.
Don.
George, yes.
Or we should wait until after George speaks. What would you like?
George. George, did I lose you?
I don't hear him.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can now.
Don?
Yep, George.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Are we all having internet?
Should I move up? Yeah, I'm in my usual spot. Should I move, or can you hear me?
I can hear you. I just can't see you. But Diane was asking if you wanted to say anything before she speaks on the HDC for the HDC.
No, the only reason I interjected at all was you asked me a question and then you went out, and then Attorney Wilson spoke. You had asked me something about new information coming in.
Yeah, it just concerned me that was raised.
Yeah, it's your procedure not to take new information in, to just kind of limit it to what was before the commission, and then any arguments based on that. So that's your typical procedure on these. The legislation doesn't specify one way or another, but that's your practice. And it looks like it's not an issue anyway, because it's not a major part of the presentation.
Right. Thank you. Perfect.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Diane, I'll go back to you.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I wanted to cover some points because first of all, just as a matter of principle, that we should see, or Mr. Wilson should present, when these different places were approved with the COA saying approval, not just that they happened, because lots of the ones at the beginning that we found were not approved. They were put up. So that's just a piece of information. We also have established a solar panel propagation that we try and follow. That is a black roof. It should be better, the whole roof, and it can be used, trees and stuff can be used to protect it from visibility. We try and work hard. We tried the 16 Pippin's Way of the Slozix that he kept bringing up is about 300 to 400 feet away. You do see it, and we know that we're trying to work to make things good for people who want solar, but to have it fit in. And it was decided after many views that you would be going down that road fast enough that it would be hard to discern, and they were going to make the farm solar. They have it on the barn, and they're going to continue just the same way that Bartlett Farm has become solar. It's important that we are trying to work to do this for our farms, which are under terribly high electric bills. We're all aware of that. So that is the thing. We do not arbitrarily and capriciously refuse places. We try and work with them if it can be done. We also have made mistakes that make things stick out, but we shouldn't have a mistake that we say is a mistake to be perpetrated continually. Mistakes, we have to learn by them. And if you want to send this back, we'll look at it again. But we are establishing a whole new set of rules and regulations and what will work. And it is very difficult, like the 4,000, however many solar panels they wanted. The water company that we were given half an hour to decide. We have to work this out with everybody. We don't want the houses. And as far as I am sort of concerned, that Washington Street is certainly part of Old Nantucket. I don't know what anybody else does, but I thought it was considered part of Old Nantucket. And that is important. It's important to know whether these were approved. And like 11 Pond, if the place is turned so it is hard to see, we will try and give them the solar panels. If it's blaringly out in front, we try not to have them on the front of the building. So that's it. That's just some things for you to consider along with other things that you've heard. And thank you.
Thank you, Diane. Did other HDC members wish to speak? Val?
I don't see where the little hand thing is, sorry.
You can physically raise your hand too.
Okay, so first and foremost, the biggest point I would like to make is that if we're going to talk about Slozix Farm, is that that's the rear of the house Yes, it faces a road, but it's the rear. It's being on the front of a house and on the primary roof. And just to clarify, Eel Point has most of the panels on the main mast and some on the secondary mast. So that was conveniently left out. The other examples, for instance, 6 Nantucket, that was truly something, if you look through the minutes or watch the video, was we're going to try this and see how it goes. Everybody was a little wary, but it is one of the main reasons why we are now trying to stick to the front of the house scenario, because that is really sort of a catastrophe. Pond Road didn't provide their screening as was mandated, and I don't know how that's going to be handled, but I think another important thing to mention is that we asked for screening so that when you drive on Eel Point Road and you see the sweeping vista, you don't see the panels first and foremost on this house, which is in the middle of a wide open sweeping field. I asked to have the screening, just some screening. It wasn't like anything elaborate. Put near the parking area, which is sort of, 30 or 40 feet away from the house, to mitigate the impact coming down Eel Point Road. They had offered to do a berm, but right on the street, which did nothing except if you were walking by on the street and looking down the driveway. So I don't know why it was met with such dissension, because they were offering vegetation in the first place. It was merely the placement of that. And also, they asked us for the denial. So let's be clear about that. We weren't going to give them a denial. We wanted them to come up with some more ideas, and we'd go back and forth. And it was simply stated, we'd like a denial so we can appeal to the select board. So that's the scenario as it happened. The sustainable preservation document guideline, which was put together in 2009, was not put together by the HDC. It was a collaborative effort between Sustainable Nantucket, Clean Air, Cool Planet, and a Historic Green Committee. I do believe probably Linda was part of that as maybe an HDC member. So there was definitely some input, but just to be clear, it did not get generated solely from the HDC. The introduction of this guideline states simply, the intent of this document is to provide assistance to Nantucket owners and construction professionals who wish to incorporate the concepts and practices of sustainability into their structures, while maintaining the historic integrity of the overall character of the island. Incorporating these guidelines will help maintain the sense of place that's enjoyed by locals and tourists alike, while achieving the goal of energy efficiency. Also, the standards on which this document was based, which are the gold national standards, are from the Secretary of Interior's office. Specifically, I'm referring to the standard for treatment of historic properties and the Secretary of Interior standards for rehabilitation under 36 CRF 67. So we are not reinventing the wheel here. You will also recall, we as an island are a National Historic Landmark, and so those standards apply to the entire island. They were widely adopted when they were generated and relied upon in good effect. In fact, the majority of applications that come before the HDC are approved with minor, if any, conditions. In recent memory, there's been 2, I guess I can think of, cases where the applicant is actually asking for a denial, this is one in front of you today. And it's presumably to, seek some relief that we're arbitrary and capricious. I would just also point out that the town government has a website for the Nantucket Energy Office, and they have an interactive solar map. And one just needs to click on that to see how many installations have been approved as appropriate and exist on the island to date. So in wrapping up, I'd just say this applicant appeared 4 times. It was never flat out refused. It was simply asked to cooperate with us and work with us, as it's the front of the building. It's in a sweeping field where it can be seen better than the large house next to it. And we offered ground array with some screening, a little screening in front of the parking area to mitigate the impact, nothing major. And we were denied or asked for a denial because none of those things were acceptable. So I think the HDC did try to work with them on this. And I think you should uphold our decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Kathy Flynn.
Hi, thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to mention something quickly that at the third hearing, Katuitt Solar did ask the board if it was a possibility that they would approve a ground mount array. And she asked for guidance, and they did give her some suggestions like adding solar to the pergola or adding a pergola or perhaps a ground mount. And at the final hearing, they came back with the original submission plus the other examples that Attorney Wilson provided to you. So they did try to work with them.
Thank you, Kathy. This is a public hearing if anyone else from the general public wishes to speak on it. Are there any rebuttals? Michael Wilson?
You rebutted.
Oh, Diane, could you mute, please? Diane, you're not muted. Thank you. Michael Wilson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And through the chair, in response to Commissioner Coombs' request, the dates of all of those approvals are on the certificates of appropriateness that were in the application that you had before you on January 19th when it was denied. And all of those dates are on those forms. In response to Commissioner Oliver's statement, I think it supports my position. She was talking about the proposal from the applicant to put a vegetated berm, as was suggested by Commissioner Pohl, who's on the HDC sitting on these hearings, put a vegetated berm at the end of the driveway and it would completely screen this house. Commissioner Oliver just stated a vegetated berm at the beginning of the driveway would only block the solar array from someone walking on Eel Point Road. Well, that's the jurisdiction of the HDC, Eel Point Road, not the parking area up next to the house.
You're
not
misquoting me.
I'm sorry, I'm speaking. So not anything beyond the public way. So in fact, she makes the point, as Commissioner Pohl made, the vegetated berm at the beginning of the driveway would block the view from people on Eel Point Road. You know, whether you're driving fast on Pulpus Road and that's a reason why you aren't going to notice the solar array, or you're driving slow because Eel Point Road is bumpy, that's not the test. And while, you know, some of the other information that was brought up about federal guidelines and other information that was brought in this hearing, it's really not something that the board should consider. This board is limited solely to the administrative record. It's the approvals that this HDC had already approved. I would submit the minutes from the meetings in which this application was denied, which includes 16 Pippin's Way, suggesting that if there were more panels, these panels will eventually blend in with the rest of the panels. And to go to Ms. Flynn's statement, I did not provide these to the board tonight, nor did I provide them to the Historic District Commission. They were part of the applicant's application in the administrative record. This is just me referencing what the board had, what the commission had before them, and what I believe the board's constrained in reviewing. So if you have a black panel on a black roof that is 60 feet on the front of the house facing south, that's 60 feet away from a road, and that's approvable, and I guess they now think that approval is a catastrophe, but something that's on a black solar panel on a black asphalt roof that's over 300 feet from a public way, and that's somehow no longer acceptable. That really fits an arbitrary and or capricious basis. And there really can't be any other sort of way to characterize that. Being, regretful for something that the commission previously approved that is exactly the same as this really is the hallmark of capriciousness. And that's all I have in rebuttal.
Thank you. Are there any rebuttals from the HDC?
I would just like to clarify my statement. We asked for a vegetative screen closer to the house because of the position of the house from Eel Point Road. Screening at the road would not do any good. You're driving down the road and there's a wide open vista. I don't think it's unreasonable. They were going to screen at the road. Why can't they screen right there, right before the parking area? They could have had an approval already. So you're misquoting what I said, but that's what I meant.
Thank you. Any other rebuttals from either side? Okay, once again, before I close the public hearing, this is a public hearing.
Madam Chair, I believe Holly wants to speak.
Holly back.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would be remiss as the preservation planner to not remind everyone that the HDC's Building with Nantucket in Mind is basis of the Secretary of the Interior standards for rehabilitation, preservation, restoration. Those are the foundations to which our design guidelines are created. That was first and foremost. Also, the entire island not only is a National Historic Landmark, but the entire island is also a local district from 1970 after the two local 55 districts were created. So that would also be a case in point of why the HDC has the entire island's jurisdiction. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Holly. At this point, Linda Williams, before I close the public hearing.
Solar panels have been, since they first came into being on Nantucket when I was on the HDC, have, sort of been a sticky wicket for quite a while because it's new technology. How do you blend it in with historic structures? Eel Point, certain areas of Nantucket, Tristram's not old Nantucket, Tom Nevers, places that are in the hinterlands of Nantucket, have never been really considered areas of critical concern. The whole island is, as Holly said, an historic district as of 1971, thereabouts, the Kennedy Bill. But these are outlying areas. And if we can't do solar panels on a black roof 300 feet from the road and just see them as you're going by, big deal, then they're really not going to be allowed anywhere because you really have to put them on a south-facing roof, at least the technology that's currently existing. They're most effective on a south-facing roof. Just on Eel Point, these houses up on the bluff on Eel Point, they really face the water, from which they probably would be more visible. But these are basically the fronts, the backs, because they're on the bluff and then they face Eel Point. So whether it's front or back, or whether it's on a secondary element is considered usually a dormer or something like that. And these are on a dormer apparently. So it's on a flatter pitch on top of it. It's hard to fathom where they're going to be allowed at all if we can't get a grip on these outlying areas, because there are several in Nantucket now that are visible, but they really don't have an impact. The first one in Nantucket was right on the road, and you can see them. And that was sort of a test case. a lot of the ones that have come in since then, as Val said, have been on weird other alternative roofs, far away in Tom Nevers, places like that. But this is out on Eel Point Road, again, 300 feet from the road. And screening up at the parking area is not going to do much, but obstruct everybody's views up there. It'd be an unnatural vegetative barrier, and it would be below the roof. So I don't know how much it would do up there, since the jurisdiction is when you're standing on the road and not from an airplane or out in somebody else's yard out there on left or right, east or west. So I'd ask you to overturn their decision, or at minimum remand it so we can continue to have the discussion, as Val mentioned earlier.
Thank you, Linda. Before I close the public hearing, does the board have any questions for anyone? Matt?
Yeah, I have a question. I guess with the HDC, if they had taken away the array on the west side, which is sort of triangular shaped, and they had just had one rectangular in the center mass, would that have been a more acceptable version, do you believe?
I'll answer that. No, it's the front of the house. We are sincerely trying to follow these guidelines and not have them on the front of the house. They could have had a ground array and put a very minimal screening from the road, but they didn't want to do the ground array. So I think it's really important to stop and think about how this could impact this island. And you're saying maybe we should only protect the historic part of town, and I would just caution that that is a slippery slope, and that the rest of the island doesn't matter. We're going to start to look like the mainland with all of these little things creeping in, and I don't think it's unreasonable to try and keep them off the front of the house, like the Nantucket house, which was an experiment.
Melissa?
Thanks so much, Dawn. I guess I have a question, a clarifying question of why the applicants did not feel a ground array was sufficient. And then I have a second question about the proposal.
I'll take that one. I'm not sure the ground array was something they wanted to do, given the limited yard area. A lot of this lot, if you've driven out there, is scrub. It's not cultivated all the way down to Eel Point. So they have an area up by the house, and it's questionable whether a ground array would not have been visible because it's on a rise above the level of Eel Point Road. It's kind of a, they all go up the hill as they go further out Eel Point Road. So I'm not sure ground array was seriously considered because of the limited cultivated area and the where the house is located. But I don't think they went too far down that road, but that would be something to be discussed at another time.
Melissa?
Thank you. And then I guess a follow-up. I'm certainly not a solar expert, but my understanding is that installing them on south-facing roof pitches is actually where the solar arrays are more efficient when they're roof installed. Is that correct? So would then a south-facing roof installation be more energy efficient and accomplish what they were looking to accomplish in terms of energy savings as opposed to a ground array?
Absolutely. That is my understanding of these things, which is just as probably as rudimentary as everybody else. But as my understanding, having worked with other clients with these things, that south-facing roof is still the industry standard, or at least a flat roof, because I just got a whole bunch approved out at Sun Island, but they are on flat roofs. So my understanding is still on the south-facing roof. If you look at the ice rink, those are on the sort of the southwest-facing roof, facing Surfside Road.
Michael Wilson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The application and the decision of where the panels and the configurations are is based on an engineered analysis of the roof and the daylight that it encounters. And all of that is done by the company. So they optimize the array with the least amount of panels. You get your biggest bang for buck. So yes, that was why that location was chosen.
One more comment, if I will. A lot of the houses out there, as you know, are not year-round homes. They're summer homes. In this particular case, whether it's a mitigating factor or not, this particular structure is now a year-round home because the individual is living there. Their son is living there and has a business here. I believe it's fresh year-round. And so he wanted to maximize his energy conservation by doing this in that house on the south side of the house.
Thank you. Christy?
Thank you. I have a question for Michael Wilson. It was stated in the minutes and also brought up tonight that you specifically asked for a denial. And I was just curious as to why the applicant did that.
Madam Chair, I did not represent this application. Cotuit Solar, Ms. Lentz was the agent who was putting this forward. I can only opine that I would be shocked if they asked that it be denied. I would be more inclined to think that they asked for it to go to a vote because if you look at the number of times that this was continued, a couple of times I think due to weather issues, a couple of times for views, it was held for views and some commissioners didn't take the views, but I wasn't present, so I can't answer that question.
I was present.
Val?
I was present, and you can also watch the video clip of it. We had moved to hold it for more revisions and discussion, and Karen, the representative, came on and said, actually, we don't want to do that. We'd like a denial in that exact way. So I advise you guys to watch it so you can see for yourselves.
Kathy?
Yes, they had discussed screening. Val again reiterated what she wanted for screening towards the house. They all motioned for revisions. It was voted on, and then Karen said, Ray, that the homeowner doesn't want to plan anything. So the only other option was a denial.
Thank you. Matt?
Yeah, first, just a general comment. I think this should, I look and I appreciate how busy the HDC is, that it took this long. And I looked at the numbers of applications you're dealing with, how we're going to deal with these types of things, and get, maybe get new guidelines, et cetera, with the sort of the amount of work that you're under is just unclear to me, because it's when I just look and my head explodes looking at how much work you do. That's number one. I just, so I could see the frustration on the part of applicants. If it takes 4 or 5 months, I can see their frustration and why they'd ask for it. But I would like to, I'd like to support the applicant, but I'm having a hard time because the standard is so hard. I mean, that arbitrary and capricious is very difficult. It doesn't seem to me like you're whimsical. It didn't seem like you didn't think about it. It didn't seem like you're willing to work. I mean, it took a little while because of the amount of work you're under, but I think that so I'm having a hard time saying that you've been arbitrary and capricious. But at the same time, I'm a big proponent of this, and they don't, and I can't substitute my what I like. I mean, I look and think I could see, I could look at this and make my determination, which was a question I asked Val. I could see it on that one plane, and I think, in my opinion, that would be less intrusive. But I'm not basing my judgment on that, and nor am I allowed. And and I think that the roof is less.
Excuse me, Diane Coombs. Thank you.
I think the roof is less obtrusive sometimes than the ground arrays. I find those fairly ugly at times. So, but again, I'm not basing it on that. I'm looking at what I believe you guys have done the work and are trying to do. I don't necessarily agree with it, but I don't think that you've been arbitrary and capricious in this.
Okay, just so we know, we're still in questions that the board might have of the applicants before I officially close the public hearing and we go to our deliberations. Linda Williams, you have your hand up, but really we're in board questions. Is there a brief point that you need to make that hasn't already been made?
Yeah, just a brief point. If there isn't support to overturn the HDC decision, I'd ask you to remand it so we can try to work it out.
Which is what we were trying to do.
Yeah.
Oh,
There's an idea that coming.
I need to recognize you. Sorry. Let's not have a back and forth between Linda and Val. Are there any more questions from the board to help in making the decision on this? Okay, I'm going to close the public hearing and then we can go to board comments. Matt?
Well, I guess I've kind of already made them. So I'm sorry, I've jumped the gun, Don. That's basically what I'm saying. I think I'm in favor of a remand, but let's hear what everyone else has to say.
I was just trying to keep the flow. Melissa and Christine?
Thanks so much, Don. Yeah, I think my thoughts are very similar to the last hearing we had on these solar panels, that I really think these guidelines need to be reviewed and updated. I have a very difficult time understanding this denial, but I also understand and respect the process of the HDC. And I do agree, Matt, that the arbitrary and capricious line is, the bar is set very high for a reason. But I do think that we're going to continue to see these applications that are denied coming before this board for an appeal, because the standards are not meeting the needs of today's homeowners who are trying to be energy efficient. And so somewhere we need to see the balance between historic preservation and energy conservation. And right now, I think these two are too far apart, and they should be closer together. So I don't know where the HDC is in their process. I know that last time we met, there was a conversation about perhaps another committee being formed to review these guidelines, whether that's an HDC initiative or a town initiative, I don't know. But I think we're going to continue to see this kind of frustration and debate until we make progress on updating the guidelines.
Christine?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I had a lot of the several of the same thoughts that Melissa just spoke about. I think not having clear standards makes it very clear for our board to make a decision, because when I hear things like, other locations were approved with a black roof, even closer to the road than this, then it does feel very arbitrary to me. And again, when I hear statements like we have to help the farms, does it depend on who's the applicant? Because I think we should also be helping our homeowners and our community members. So I think that's where I start to feel like it is a little bit arbitrary of who's getting approved and who's not. So I think if it's the rest of the board, I would feel comfortable remanding it back to the HDC and seeing if we can find a way to make this work. I know that arbitrary and capricious standard is hard to meet, so it's hard to overturn, but I do think this is something, like Melissa said, that we're going to keep seeing over and over again until we start to find a solution that works for both sides. Thanks.
Thanks, Christine. I'm not sure. Oh, Jason, sorry, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Question for Mr. Pucci. I didn't see the farm in the packet. Maybe it was. If it wasn't in there, can we use that? Because it was brought up by multiple, both sides. Can we use that as a decision point, George?
Through the chair,
Yeah.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. You're not missing much if you can't see me, but I am on camera. Do you see me, Dawn?
We can see you, George.
Oh, good. Okay. I was worried because you said earlier you couldn't hear me or see me or something. It's usually better if you can't see me. But first of all, good evening. Again, George Pucci from Town Council's office. Good to be with you tonight. In response to Mr. Bridges' question, yes, you can consider that the issue of if you're thinking of, you know, where something else has been approved or denied and how that may or may not be analogous to this situation, that would be a relevant consideration for you.
Thank you.
Michael Wilson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you to Attorney Pucci and to Mr. Bridges. The 16 Pippin's Way appears in the minutes of the meeting. It's the application that immediately preceded the applicant, which is the subject of this hearing. And so it is included. And for that, I would agree with Attorney Pucci that it is very much part of the administrative record on this matter. If I could just briefly, since Town Council's weighing in, subject to your approval, Madam Chair, to just go back to Mr. Fee's point that they have a lot of applications. They do a ton of work over there. It's mind-boggling what happens in that office with all of the applications they have.
I'd like to keep it to procedural.
Sure, and this is on that issue, as well as Ms. Ferrantella's statement that it's a very high standard. And Attorney Pucci can probably confirm this. It's not whether, you know, to meet that standard of whether it was arbitrary or capricious, it's not whether they gave it a number of viewings, a significant number, or short shrift at the hearings. It's not that the process wasn't used or was used. It's that this denial can only be viewed as arbitrary as it relates to the other approvals for similar applications that are in the administrative record. Not whether this was seen 6, 7, or 9 times for whatever reason, or not that there wasn't a significant amount of discussion about whether we're going to plant trees or whether the applicant was choosing to eliminate one portion of the array or not. That's the process. The appeal, and for this board, I would submit, subject to Attorney Pucci's confirmation, is whether the denial of this application can only be considered arbitrary as compared to other approvals that the board had been aware of in the process of making this denial. And I'd ask through the chair whether Mr. Pucci could confirm that analysis.
George Pucci, would you like to respond?
Yes, it's relevant to the determination, but it's not the only thing, because you know, you have a number of other considerations. You have the guidelines, how those were followed in other instances, and whether that's consistent with the way they were followed in this instance. You have section 9B of the Act, where you consider the features of the exterior architectural feature here, the solar array, and the location on the lot in question, the relationship of such factors to other similar features of buildings in the immediate surroundings, those types of issues. That issue of, you know, remote location, that is in the guidelines, that, you know, areas like the downtown are treated with more scrutiny than a remote area or something that's not as visible immediately from the, you know, the publicly accessible area. And then you have, so you have all these considerations. You have the ability to consider whether or not it could be adequately screened, because those are conditions that can be maintained in perpetuity. If you have some type of landscaping feature that can mitigate the visual effect, you know, those can be conditions in the certificate of appropriateness, which will then be enforceable in perpetuity on that condition. As Attorney Wilson pointed out, you can consider other approvals or denials, and how those, you know, you feel as though they're analogous to this situation, and that could be a basis for concluding, you know, that either there's a rational basis for the decision or there isn't a rational basis. That, gee, why did you approve these 3 applications and not this one. They seem similar to me, that type of analysis. So it comes down to arbitrary and capricious doesn't mean, that the commission is out of its mind. It just is it's a term of art, but what it basically means is you have to determine whether there's sufficient evidence in support of the decision that a reasonable mind would deem adequate to support it. So if you find some rational basis for the denial, then that would be grounds to deny the appeal. If you can't, if looking at the record, you can't really find a rational basis for it, that would be grounds for affirming the appeal. And what all the select board members' comments have been relevant. Another example of a relevant comment is when Christy had mentioned you can't treat a type of user differently jurisdiction in terms of exterior architectural features, not the particular user, like if it's for a farm versus residential use. It's just how that exterior feature relates to the surroundings and any other standards that the commission has been applying, such as through these guidelines that they do have. And the guidelines may need updating, but the fact is there are certain provisions in those guidelines that you could look at and say, well, were these followed or not? So those would all be possible bases for your conclusions for acting on this appeal. I should note, before someone asks me about it, is you don't, unless all the parties are going to agree, okay, we'll put a hold on this appeal for now, and we'll go back and make another effort with the commission. You don't have the ability to remand it to the commission for further consideration unless you first uphold the appeal. So I just want you to keep that in mind, sort of inherent, if further discussions between the commission and the applicant are going to result, those are either going to result as the result of you remanding it to them, or the applicant just files a new application and starts a new process with them. But the only way that it's going to get to the commission through you is if you do make that finding of upholding the appeal and determining that the remedy is a remand hearing. So I just want to be clear with you on that.
Thank you for clarifying, George. That was going to be my question.
Point of order, Madam Chairman. A clarification through town council. Is there a prohibition, once it's denied, if you don't uphold the appeal and remand it, it will stand as a denial? It has been.
I have to.
But you can't come back for a year. I just want to clarify that through town council.
I'll ask that question, but don't interrupt until you've been recognized. Val, I'll come to you if you have a question.
It's Wicket. It's just quick. We were asked to deny it.
Yeah,
we were anxious to deny it. So just so that's clear.
Let's just try and stick to where we're at with information. George, could you just clarify that question?
Yeah, I was not aware of that. Is there a provision that precludes the applicant from going back?
I don't see why it would if they make a change to the layout.
I was unaware of that in all of these that I've handled. I haven't seen that in the act. Is that some type of regulation or guideline that I don't know about? I'm unaware of anything that precludes an applicant from going back to the HDC.
Through you, Madam Chairman, it was voted on at town meeting years ago, and I don't know what's happened to it since then.
I mean, maybe it was for HDC, but I mean, when I've heard that is a town meeting reference to warrant articles.
Yeah, it's not codified anywhere. If that was, I'm unaware of it in the town bylaws, or it's definitely not in the special act And I don't know of it in any regulations, but.
Okay, thank you. The public hearing has been closed. From this point forward, we are in board deliberations unless there is a question for council specifically. So I just need to get a handle on this hearing again. I believe that this is a similar situation to the last solar appeal that we heard, where there were some provisions offered in terms of getting to an approval. Maybe those wouldn't have, maybe it still would have resulted in this, but I'm not sure why the applicant chose not to continue the back and forth with the HDC and offer an additional screening plan. It's consistent with their guidelines to ask for things like a black roof, which this has, like a distance from the road, like screening. And it seems that they were close, but they were asked for screening, and that's not arbitrary in all of their hearings. It does give me a bit of pause, the testimony about the farm and the use. That really concerns me, and the HDC should not be making references like that between applicants. And the remand is not an option as I see it, because we would have to uphold the appeal, but the applicant is perfectly within their rights to go reapply and work this out. I mean, I feel like it's a little bit unfair to bring it to us when the HDC was still willing to work with them on alternatives. So, and again, I do agree with the rest of the board that we have to make some further strides in figuring out what is approvable for the solar technology. It's really important, and there is nothing inherently historic about an asphalt roof. So, Michael Wilson, if it's a procedural, but I can't take any further testimony.
It is procedural. You may have been in error in your opinion that the applicant did not take the suggestion of the commission and come back with a landscaping proposal, because it was held for a view and the applicant was required to put out stakes with a string to show where the berm was. So that was very much part of it.
No, I thank you, because I do understand that they had one landscaping proposal and then they asked for them to move it closer to the house because of the topography. So thank you for clarifying my point, but I was aware of that. So I'm not sure what the pleasure of the board is at this stage, Matt.
Just one question: if they go and write out if we deny and they write out a new application, how long before this is heard again?
I think an application gets heard, what is it, around 10 or 12 days? It depends on when it's filed. Kathy, do you want to answer that?
That would be up to the chair to decide. We're getting about over 100 submissions a week right now, record numbers, but in order, the chair sets the agenda. So that could be worked out with the chair.
Right. Yeah, I would like, just for courtesy, I would like to see it come back quickly and try to, I wouldn't want these people to have to wait another 6 weeks or 8 weeks just to be heard. I would like to think that they'd, have their day again quickly.
Jason?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I kind of see where this is going, and hope it comes back. Hope they figure something out. But I do believe, for the first time since I've been on the board, we've been through a lot of HECs, that this was an arbitrary decision when compared to the other approvals. It was the farm that got me. I agree that we should help out the farms, but that's what put me over the edge, and that's why I asked George Pucci if I could consider that. And so that gave me allowed me to find a rational basis for the appeal. So that's where I'm at. Is
anyone ready to make a motion? There is an option for the board to take it under further advisement, but I'm not sure that you want to delay things.
Don,
Yes, George.
just as you know, I usually speak when spoken to, but just since everybody sort of appeared to want to have further dialogue, I mean, would it possibly be something agreeable to the appellant to have the board defer action on this, pending a further discussion with the commission about the screening issues, and up with a solution? That would be a way of you not either denying or affirming the appeal, and maybe it moots the appeal, but it's just a suggestion as a possible middle ground, so that you don't have to take a draconian action one way or the other, either overturning the commission or upholding them under circumstances that you're not thrilled about.
Michael Wilson, would you like to respond on that?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you to Attorney Pucci. Could you just please reiterate, for my edification, for the board's edification, what you had said previously about this board cannot unilaterally remand this unless they make the vote, and the vote would be, well, I'll allow you to address that before I'm able to comment on the request, I guess.
Right. The vote, Don, if this is okay, if I can answer this.
Yes.
The vote, the board is going to have to act on the appeal. So they're either going to have to affirm or deny the appeal unless, action is deferred with the consent of the appellant. Section 11 of the Act only provides that the board shall hear and act on such appeals promptly, and the decision of the board shall be as determined by a majority vote of the members of the board. So they really have to act on the appeal one way or another before they made any effort to remand it. I mean, and I'm not predicting what their vote is. Their vote could be to deny the appeal. So I'm just suggesting, maybe a middle way. If the applicant is, anticipating having further dialogue with the commission that can lead to an approval, with conditions that the applicant is satisfied with, why go, why not make that effort? But it would strictly be with your assent. So I'll shut up about the thinking out of the box solution and just leave it to you, Don, if you just want to go forward with the vote. But it was just a suggestion.
Well, we don't even.
If further, yeah.
So,
Madam Chair.
Yes, go ahead.
So as I understand it, and Attorney Pucci, please confirm my understanding, the only way this goes back to the HDC is if we agree to your suggestion and bring it back voluntarily, or the board votes in favor of the appeal and orders it remanded.
Correct.
Because if the vote is to deny the appeal, it goes to the Superior Court.
Well, only if you then appeal that.
Right.
Oftentimes the board will deny appeals and the applicant doesn't file with Superior Court. They end up going back to the commission, or they fold their tents and they don't pursue it. So, I can't predict the future, but certainly that route would be available under the Act. Obviously, you go to Superior Court appealing the board's decision if it was a denial of your appeal. So
thank you. Just so I'm clear and the board's clear. So the way that this gets remanded is in theory, if the select board approves the appeal and orders it back to the HDC.
Right.
Yes, we can't deny the appeal and order a remand.
And I was just offering to the applicant, the ability to voluntarily go back to the commission, have the board defer the action. It's sort of like what's behind door number one. Then you wouldn't be risking
So you don't have a
you know,
denial.
the denial of the appeal if the board goes ahead and votes. But it, you know, again, I'll shut up. I just wanted to give it as an option that there's always sort of a middle ground that you can pursue.
Matt?
I think that's a pretty good suggestion, because especially if that allows the chair of the HCC to bring it back quickly, and then we do, and hopefully you guys come to a solution, and if not, we then deal with it. But I think it's a good solution, because I'm worried about starting a new application and how long that might take to be heard, and and I'm worried about the town and or you guys spending money at court if we're close enough to find a reasonable solution to this.
Michael Wilson, what's the verdict? Or Christine, do you have a comment?
Just a clarification question. So if we're affirming the appeal versus denying it, can you just clarify that's upholding the HDC if we're affirming the appeal?
No, we would have to find that the HDC acted arbitrarily and capriciously in denying this. We would have to rule in favor of the appellant and then remand it to the HDC to work it out.
Okay, thank you.
And that's correct, right, George?
Yes. And the other thing, you have a lot of authority if you uphold an appeal and send it back to the commission. I mean, you could actually send it back ordering them to issue the certificate with reasonable conditions. So, that power is pretty great in the event you do uphold an appeal. But again, you can't do it. Inherent in upholding an appeal is finding that they were arbitrary and capricious. And that's how that gets back to them for a remand with instructions to the commission how you think that, how you're directing them to act on it. So again, and power, which you have. But as all the members are recognizing, you tend to be sparing in that authority because of the tough standard of finding that they're, the required finding of arbitrary and capriciousness.
Christy?
I'm ready to make a motion. Everybody else is.
Okay, can I just go back to Michael Wilson to see if he wanted us to hold on?
You're asking if I want door number 2, Madam Chair?
I'm just, since George raised it, I have to give you the opportunity.
I mean, after being tempted by board member Bridges and Ferrantella, I can read the writing on the wall that it would be everybody's request and hope that we work together. My client doesn't want to go back and get beaten up. They want the roof array because that's the way Katuitt Solar engineered it. So I'd ask the board, I don't know if it's appropriate to ask the board to uphold the appeal and remand it to issue a certificate of appropriateness subject to adequate vegetative screening, like we've seen countless times. If there's no traction in that direction, then I'll take door number 2.
Okay, thank you. Christy, are you ready to make a motion?
Yes. I'll make the motion to uphold the appeal and find the denial arbitrary and remand it back to the HDC.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor by roll call, Melissa Murphy?
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella?
Aye.
Matt Fee?
No.
Jason Bridges?
Aye.
I'm a no. Motion carries.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, members of the board, and thank you, Town Council. Thank you,
Board.
Historic District Commission, Administration, and Commissioners. I appreciate all of your time.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, is there any, just anything we need to understand process-wise, what happens next, or are we done from here?
I guess you might want to detail the remand a little bit because you're sending it back as the same application and asking the HDC to make a different decision, basically. But they can make the same decision as well if there's no new application provided, which was sort of the other path, is they could voluntarily go back and change the application. So you might want to consider sending it back with conditions that would help make it approvable based on the testimony that's been given. Like what George said, but I didn't vote in favor of it because I couldn't find that they were arbitrary and capricious with the information submitted, but the favorable votes should decide how they want to remand it.
May I ask George Pucci a question?
Yes, please.
Mr. Pucci, what do we have the authority to put what we'd like to see in the remand?
Yeah, you could say that, you could vote that, some conditions for remand that, we're ordering remand for reconsideration in light of our finding that your denial was arbitrary and capricious. The remand hearing should include discussion of reasonable conditions to mitigate visual effects, such as vegetative screening. You could do all of that. It's very vague. The statute doesn't provide you any guidelines on that. And even if it went to Superior Court, even that with a remand is just basically remand for further action by the commission or such other decree as justice and equity may require. So these are pretty nebulous standards, but I mean, this one isn't rocket science. Certainly craft a fairly simple motion of what you're instructing that the scope of the remand hearing should be occasion and conditioning the approval through vegetative screening or other reasonable measures, something along those lines.
Jason?
Yes, and is that something we need to do right now?
Yeah.
Yeah, it would help to give the commission clarity. Yep.
And just to further clarify, we can make the suggestions. Please look at this, and the HGC can still deny it, and then we'll see what happens with that. Correct? They're just suggestions.
Yes.
Okay.
Erica?
I'm so sorry. When George was speaking on my end, it was garbled. It was cutting out. I don't know if it was for anybody else's. So I only caught reasonable conditions to mitigate something such as vegetative screening. There was a middle piece.
Impact. He was breaking up a bit.
Mm-hmm.
To mitigate visual effects. I mean, I'm just giving examples. It's not my province to do that for you, but I'm giving you examples of conditions for the remand. I mean, just to simply remand it, without saying why you're doing it is not that helpful. But it seemed like the issue had to do with vegetative screening. So you could remand it with instructions to reconsider the application in light of our finding that the denial was arbitrary and capricious, and consider such issues such as reasonable mitigation of visual effects through vegetative screening or otherwise.
Jason?
Yeah, for me, that's fine. What you said there, George, I agree with that approach. For me, I did say why. I didn't say it in the motion, but I did say that it was the farm approach, right? And so I would suggest to use the same sensitivity and the same approach of trying to make it work like they did for the farm for this property. And that's really where I'm coming from. And I think HEC was getting there. They were trying, but it wasn't enough.
To make things easier, John, as well, unless the board has something that they're ready to vote, you could also vote to have council work with the operations administrator to craft a remand order consistent with the issues discussed at the hearing. And then you could bring that back for a vote and, adopt that at a later meeting.
You do have to do
that.
a correct on this? George, there has to be a decision in writing that goes back to the HDC on this? And
right, you could
Oliver,
vote that tonight, that we vote to have, we vote to instruct town council to draft a proposed remand order for our consideration that will then be sent pursuant to our vote affirming the appeal. You could do that.
Melissa?
I think that's an excellent suggestion, because I think without clear direction, I think the HDC will continue to feel confused by the discussion that's happening tonight and the reasons why we remanded. So I don't know, do we need a motion to that effect, George, to instruct council? So so moved per George's description of this board working with town council.
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor by roll call, Melissa Murphy?
Oh, Matt just raised his hand. Don.
Further discussion on the motion?
Mine was the same. I think you guys need a draft and to come, get a look at the draft and get it written and then make the motion. So I'm not going to support this, but I think getting a draft, we've done that in previous situations like this.
Thank you. Melissa Murphy?
Sorry. Okay, thank you. Yeah, aye. Thank you.
Christy Parentella?
Aye.
Matt Fee?
No.
Jason Bridges?
Aye.
Don Holgate, no. That wraps up what we're doing, but if there's, if the HDC board members, I see Diane and Val both had hands up. If you need clarification, there will be further clarification coming, it sounds like. Val?
Oh, I was just confused because we were asking to work with the applicant some more and they requested a denial. So we gave them a denial and I'm so confused how that can be that we're arbitrary because we were trying to work with them, but apparently this legal business is beyond me. So I'm just confused. Maybe George can explain it to us.
I think the board members that voted in favor definitely stated some positions about why they thought this was not consistent with other decisions, but it'll be further clarified. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Abby Camp? Yeah. Oh, sorry. Thanks, Val. Abby Camp?
Hi, I was just muted. I wanted to know, what farm are they referring to? Which application? That
Slozix that backs up to Pippin's Way.
Okay. Okay, I believe I voted against that, but I was trying to say something earlier, but I think that this site is a very hard site to put panels on, and it's it's mostly moors with a few black pines, and you can see it so clearly. So the things that we have passed that have panels, solar panels, have all had some form of screening. So that's what we have to do. We have to come up with some sort of solution to screen the panels because of the site itself, the topography. If you can think of Eel Point Road and how it's actually like dunes.
I totally appreciate the constraints of the site and the review that you have to go through, but at this point, you're going to have another discussion about it because the board has already voted to remand it.
Right. No, I just wanted to know what farm they were referring to, because we did do a lot of solar on Bartlett Farm, and I.
Oh, yes. No, they were referring to Slozix Farm.
Okay, thank you.
Diane, did you have a follow-up question? We can't take any more testimony on this.
It isn't testimony.
No, that's
I am with like Val under question as what you are going to, or what they're going to tell us to do. We have a way of people coming in and you know how it goes when a guy applicant makes the application. And we have, I think at the moment, we have 97 applications in front of us, and we're supposed to put these people in front of everybody else. Is that what you're asking us to do?
There will be clarification coming in the written decision.
What happens if we can't do that? I don't know. No, I don't. Well, we'll try. That's all. We'll just have to try.
For council, I mean, it could. I believe it could result in another denial. I've seen that happen before. But hopefully you can work it out.
Okay.
George, did you want to speak to that, or did that cover it?
Well, yeah, I mean, the remand order, which will come back to the board to approve, will go back to the HDC. If the applicant feels that the HDC doesn't follow that, they can file another appeal, and then they'll be back before the select board.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to close this up for tonight. That is the last.
Thanks, Dawn. Thank you.
Thank you all for your time. Appreciate it. Oh, Michael Wilson. Okay. Oh, good night. Thank you.
Bye. I was waiting for you to wrap it up. Thank you.
Rick Atherton, I saw that you raised your hand, but it was after we had already closed the public hearing. Is it in relation to something else before I take a motion to adjourn?
Dawn, can you hear me?
Yep, Rick, but we have, I couldn't take any further testimony on the HDC because I had closed the public hearing already.
That's all right. I just want to I thought it might be helpful for the board. And maybe Mr. Fee remembers from prior boards, or Dawn, you may. Two things. One, I think you're well advised to ask council to draft an opinion for you for review at a subsequent meeting. I'm glad we got to that point tonight. But number two, council's comment that you had to decide in effect for or against before you could remand. Memories are faulty. I think I remember remand orders which didn't have that as part of them. So I would suggest the board asked to review prior decisions where remand was involved, and just to see if that was the case and to clarify how you address that issue going forward. Thank you.
Thanks for that input.
Just as an aside, the last time that you had a fairly vague remand resulted in many years of litigation. So,
yeah.
So, we evolve as we go along. And so a short clarified remand order will be helpful.
Thank you, George. That's it for tonight because we already did our committee reports, unless anyone has anything else that they're dying to add.
I'll make a motion to adjourn, Dawn.
Thank you, Melissa. Is there a second? All those in favor by roll call? Melissa Murphy?
Aye.
Matt Fee?
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella?
Aye.
Ethan Bridges?
Aye.
John Holgate, aye. See you all later. Thank you. Thanks for your time. Thanks, George.
Thanks, Dawn.